I don't take a lot of information, but we'll not.
Motion carries.
Yeah, you can say it.
Okay, okay, so you'll just say, I'll read off the roll, and then I'll say motion carries. Okay.
Thank you.
Computer, but not that. What kind do you go
Well, I've been trying to go by the building one, but you probably,
Unmuted.
it says what your
phone says
computer
six.
says, what your computer says.
Sure it is.
It'll take you 15 seconds. After
ready.
Mona.
Three.
I won't ask you a question.
Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the October 17, 2023 regular meeting for the Township Board, Charter Township of Meridian. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3 on our agenda is a roll call. Ms. Gordon.
Supervisor Jackson.
Here.
Clerk Guthrie.
Here.
Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Wazinski.
Here.
Trustee Sunland.
All present, set,
All absent, yep.
6 board members present. Sunland is absent tonight.
right? Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now we go to item 4 on our agenda. We have a presentation tonight. And Fire Chief Hamill with Mr. Ted Ferris of the Boy Scouts will talk with us about that presentation.
We've been doing this for many years, and it's to help raise money for their scholarship as well as MDA. And we have a few people, TJ Booms, retired Lieutenant Jason Everest, Lieutenant Weber, and a few other people that help organize it, and then actually a lot of the firefighters go and cook with the Boy Scouts. I'm going to turn it over to them and let them kind of discuss how it all works and what the cause is for.
Right?
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr.
So my
Ferris.
name's Ted Ferris. I'm an assistant scoutmaster with Troop 125. Tim Beamer's our scoutmaster. We have 3 troops in Meridian Township. My old troop 164 got taken over by the girls. And really what happened there is we merged with 125, and then that number got set aside. So they were nice enough to pick it up, so which is cool. And then we have Troop 97 in Hazlet. Then we have 2 packs. We have 264 in Okemos and is it 360 or 265 in Hazlet. So in the past, we've had more kids involved in Scouts. That's one of our goals. One of the reasons for doing the breakfast is create some visibility, and so people know that Scouting is in the township. This actually got started, I mentioned this last year because I sent an email to Deborah when she was in the PR department, and we were looking for some way to promote our recruiting, and they said, well, would you help us with our 175th anniversary? And then they said she hit the magic word, pancake breakfast, because I'd been thinking about doing that, and the firefighters were doing it. So that's how we got started. And so this was our 6th one. Our donations were up this year, And so we have a little bit more to put into the Scout Campership scholarships. And then part of it goes to MDA, which is one of the organizations that the firefighters support. The campership scholarships, we had 4 Scouts go to camp this in 2023. The scholarship is targeted at getting our older Scouts to take a youth leader training, which is called NYLT, National Youth Leader Training. It's a 6-day event. And we're looking at trying to get all of our senior patrol leaders. So each troop is run by a boy or a girl that's the senior patrol leader. And so they have to have some skills. So you all have leadership skills. And think about where you got those. I got a lot of mine out of Scouts. And so one of our goals would be to use some of this money to get at least 3 of them through that process this coming year. Our thinking is if we have better senior patrol leaders, our troops will be run better. If you have a better group that's run and the kids talk about it a lot, you get more kids involved. So that's one way that we see to grow this, and because of the support from the firefighters, we're going to have that. One thing that I would say that scouting teaches kids to do things for themselves, to become self-reliant and self-confident. So I think we'd all agree with that. When I was Scoutmaster, one of the things that I noticed that really tickled my heart is when I could see the apron strings cut. And think about, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and where we're at today. And I think that this reminds me of one of the stories I like to tell Scouts, which is the butterfly in the cocoon. So this guy is walking down a trail and he sees this butterfly trying to get out of this cocoon. And he watches patiently and it just isn't making much progress. And eventually he gets impatient and picks it up and he looks at it and he decides, well, he'll peel it back a little bit. And then he waits and it still doesn't make much progress. He peels it back a little bit more and he waits. And eventually he peels it back far enough that the butterfly comes out. Unfortunately, it's got goop all over its wings. It falls to the ground and it can't fly. Okay, so when we work with our kids, we have to think about allowing them to struggle in order to get stronger. So that's part of what I think scouting kind of does. And recently I read a book called Coddling the American Mind, which I'd highly recommend anybody that's a parent. It covers that and some other things that I think are pretty relevant. And when we think about our kids today, we got to think about their environment. So scouting can help in some of these ways. And we certainly appreciate the firefighters because if we didn't have them to work with, we wouldn't be able to do this. And also the 242 Community Church has been very involved in allowing us to use the facilities. And then in your office over here, we had Andrea Smiley, and she retired or took another job. So now we have Rachel Stahl and Samantha Deal, and they were really good help this year. So without all that extra help, this would be a much more complicated process. So we want to thank you for your support on that as well. So. Okay, so here's what we were able to bring. We brought in roughly $1,500 net. So that was a bit more than we've done in the past. So.
That's awesome.
Great. Congratulations. Mr. Ferris, could I ask you to come back for a moment?
Uh-oh.
And just define MDA for me?
Oh, Muscular Dystrophy Association. You know what it is, yeah. But it's a good question, though, because it could mean a couple other things.
Right.
Michigan Department of Agriculture, I worked with them quite a bit.
Okay.
So anyways, there you go. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now go to item 5, which is the time at which citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. Are there members of the public here? Oh, I see. I have one green card from Mr. Tim Potter.
Good evening, Tim Potter from 4632 Van Nuys Road. So I want to address an issue related to the safety concerns that I have and I share with a number of parents from the Okemos School District about the last several incidents where we had injury crashes involving students over at Okemos schools, and also a couple up in Hazlet, but I'm going to mainly speak to the Okemos ones. I've been involved with an exploratory effort to bring in some funding to the Okemos schools through it's a federal program that comes down to the states and then is administered by the Michigan Fitness Foundation. And we're very fortunate to have some professors at MSU that have helped about 100 schools throughout the state successfully get these grant dollars, which are significant. They're now up to $300,000 per school. And this application exploration looked at getting funding for Chippewa and Kenowa schools. So for a total of $600,000, and these are major grants. There's also lesser grants for other uses. But we started almost 2 years ago, I believe it was, exploring as a committee and involved parents and some in the school, some teachers and some administration, and involving the county, since it's the road agency that is normally where the support comes from to get the whole process through, to get to actually apply for the grants. Anyway, fast forward to this past late winter, early spring, the committee, and with the help of the professors, doing audits, walking audits, biking audits, and looking at a bunch of other things around the two schools, which they consider the area a walkable area within the schools to be part of their purview or what they look at to improve for safety. And that's, they say, approximately 2 miles around the schools. They really had so many things that they came up with within a much tighter, like a mile within the schools. So most of everything was within a mile of those schools. But basically the recommendations and the drawings and everything, which I forwarded to you earlier, which was too late for this meeting, but you'll have those in your inboxes. The recommendations that they came back with, almost line by line, the county road department staff just took issue with and said they wouldn't support. And one of those things I'll highlight in the interest of time was a recommendation to construct a safety island in the middle, in the turn lane section of Kenowa Drive, which would have prevented the one incident on September 15th, where there was a driver that was impatient and didn't want to wait and was illegally passing the stopped vehicles in the center turn lane and ended up hitting a student on September 15th. So that would have helped prevent that sort of crash, which can oftentimes be fatal. So can I continue a little bit more?
Yeah, just, it's up to the.
Yes.
Since we have very few public wanting to talk.
Okay, but you are about to wrap
Yes,
up.
so that's, so the professors that are helping with this, Dr. Tim Gates, he pointed out that in almost every other case, the county road commission or department is key, and they're the ones that actually have to apply for the grants. So without their support, it's kind of DOA, unfortunately. So I plead with the board to do whatever you can to exert some pressure, or whatever you want to call it, on the county to help get these grants, this funding into the school system to help prevent future crashes that may be more serious. We hope are not, but anyway, look in your inboxes and there'll be a lot more information on this. And I appreciate your time.
And we appreciate your sharing that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the board at this time? Then we'll move on to item 7 on our agenda. Six on our agenda, Township Manager's Report.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor and Board. It's good to be here with you this evening. I want to start out with an update on the paid parental leave policy. That was approved by the board for us to start working on, and in short order, we collected. Were you going to update the board tonight under your comments? Okay. So we collected pretty quickly collected 7 different communities, what they were doing with paid parental leave, and we supplied those to the committee, which is being headed up by Trustee Hendrickson. And I assume that we'll be having a policy to you on November 9th for your first consideration if things continue to move forward. So making great progress with that. The deer cull has taken 37 deer to date. Director Clark's making great progress. You remember all the challenges we had with when we did the Village of Okemos DDA TIF and all the challenges getting that through. And Director Clark is heading the CIA TIF up, and she's doing great work. She's met with the airport, and I know she met with some of you and the county officials for the county portion of that. We met with the MEDC on Friday. Supervisor Jackson took part in that. It was a virtual meeting with the MEDC about the village project. The Brownfield Authority met on Thursday and approved the first payment to the first reimbursement to the American Home Meridian for the Brownfield Authority. The police department's having their Halloween open house on October 28th from 10 to 1. The good news is on the home TV, as you know, we've been struggling for about 3 months now with the home TV audio system as we put it out. The new equipment is in, and we're working with Comcast and then our other video folks to get that up. We should be ready to go in full operation by the November 9th meeting. The Great Divide takes place this Saturday in honor of the recognition of the football game on Saturday. The East Lansing Fire Department against the Meridian Fire Department at Home Depot at 1 o'clock, and who can cut the car in half the quickest. Sparty will be there, MSU cheerleaders, and some food, so come out and join us if you can. Chief Grillo and his team and others, I know Trustee Wilson's been very involved in this, are working on pedestrian safety over in Okemos, and there'll be more to come on that. Our Hazlet School Resource Officer is in place. Colby Cassidy is now working at the Hazlet schools. The local road program is wrapping up. Wardcliff is the final neighborhood. Pension Board, Director Ayani has got the Pension Board back in full operation, and they meet November 6th. Parks and Rec Director applications are due a week from Friday. 10 days left to apply to be our Parks and Rec Director on the 27th. We've had a number of applications. I'm pleased with where we're at. Reno is out of service due to intestinal problem. So I'll leave it at that this evening for those having dinner. And the farmers market's moving back inside to the mall. And our team building event, we had our team building event on Tuesday, or last Wednesday, and I want to thank Coach Luban at Michigan State, the men's head golf coach, and Director Alan Haler at Michigan State. They welcomed us and treated us very well. Finally, I want to recognize some. We're only as good as what our team is here at Meridian Township. And today, behind the scenes of all this happening in our home TV department, Denisha McDowell, today is her first anniversary, 1 year of service to Meridian Township. Thank you. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Robin Faust. 34 years of service this week. Jack Hughes in our engineering department actually was hired the same day as Denisha 1 year ago. And Keith Hewitt in our building department, 24 years. And John Hines in our building department, 3 years this week. So we're only as good as the people we have, and we have really good people. So thank you very much, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Walsh. Item 7 on our agenda is board member reports of activities and announcements. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. We had a CRC meeting, that's the Community Resource Commission meeting last week. And there's some really good things happening to help our low-income residents. We had a coat drive in conjunction with the recycling event at Chippewa Middle School and gathered more than 100 coats that went to the St. Luke's coat closet. And we also have a wider distribution than we've ever had before of holiday food baskets coming up. So we're really thrilled to see the work that they're doing. And the other thing that's really important is we are assembling a group of stakeholders who are involved in trying to mitigate some of the things that Tim Potter was talking about, and that is school safety, particularly in the area of Kinawa and Chippewa middle schools. So There is a Okemos School Board member, Katie Kavanaugh, and I started talking, and we had a meeting with Chief Grillo and Officer Leroy this last week. And we are going to put together a group of stakeholders, including members of the board, the police department, the school administration, the county, because Mark Polsdorfer can be very helpful to us. And we have some immediate ideas that we could put into play if all stakeholders agree that will make it a lot safer over there. So I'm really excited to be working on that project. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Along with many of our board members, I attended the listening session that we held at Hiawatha Elementary School a week ago today. It was an excellent session. We had probably 40 to 50 members of the public present to discuss a lot of issues, including the school safety issue. And I wanted to just mention, since it just happened a couple of hours ago, it sounds as though the work that Trustee Wilson and the team have started has already begun to bear fruit. Sounds like this is a report that I'm pulling from Commissioner Polsdorfer, that the Ingham County Road Department did issue a permit yesterday for some new pedestrian signage at some of the crosswalks nearby to Kinawa and Chippewa. So it'll hopefully bring some greater visibility to those areas. And in addition, they've fixed a flashing school zone light near Bennett Woods, and I've noticed this too because I drive by it every day. They've started to restripe all of the pavement markings on the roads approaching these schools that have started to fade over time. So it's amazing what we can all do when we put our minds to it, and we've got good people at every level who are working on this. So hopefully we'll continue to see more forward progress in the coming weeks.
Good. Trustee Wizinski.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. In addition to the remainder of the board, did attend the Hiawatha listening session and was well attended. I want to thank everybody that comes out, that spend 2 hours of their time to come out and actually speak with us and listen to some of our updates and some of our new endeavors. So just another thank you to the public and my board members. Also had an election commission meeting on Tuesday the 10th. I'm sure the clerk, it's on our agenda, but to discuss our early voting plan. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Land Preservation Advisory Board on Wednesday, October 11th. We met at Lake Lansing North. Yeah, Lake Lansing North Park, which I had not been to. And Emma Campbell, our naturalist, took us on a walk to show us exactly what stewardship means and what they're doing in different parks regarding stewardship. And I know there's a lot of conversation between acquisition and stewardship. And she had expressed how much time and effort, not just staff, but all the volunteers in this community that provide that stewardship. So there was some species variation happening. They're planting natural plants and trying to develop and make sure that land stays productive. So it was very good meeting, very good visual. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I attended the Friends of Okemos Library meeting last Thursday and was surprised to hear during their budget presentation portion of the meeting how much money they spend on storing books for their book sales that they have. Almost half of the money that they raise goes to pay to store books in storage facilities. So they raised $24,000 and it was $10,000 that they spent on storage facility. So the Friends are having their minds together to try to figure out a way to reduce those costs for storage facilities, see if there's another solution. And then just from the listening session, just really grateful for all the people that came out and expressed their concerns, and grateful for the committee and all of the work that's being done already.
Treasurer DeShane.
Unfortunately, I missed the listening session last week because I was at a 2-day intensive training put on by the Michigan Townships Association for township treasurers. It was very valuable, and I brought back lots of actionable ideas from that meeting. On last Friday, I did meet with Trustee Hendrickson and Director Clark with our 4 Ingham County Commissioners on the corridor improvement authority ask we're going to be making to Ingham County, to CATA. Already been asked the township, the airport authority, and we really work together to come together with a coherent message of why this is critically important that these stakeholders, the people that will be giving up some future increase in revenue, go along with the CIA plan. I think we have a good strategy forward, and we're going to be executing that with Director Clark over the next 2 months. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? We'll move to item 8. I would ask that we amend the agenda that we have tonight before approving it, to add as item 13A, Meridian Township Public Safety Recruitment and Retention Program. And that would cause us to just move everything else down to B to E. I propose that, or
Support.
move that we make that, supported by Clerk Guthrie. All in favor of the motion to approve the amended agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We now come to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes a typical communications. I would note that several of.
Supervisor, I think we need to have a motion on the whole agenda now. We approved the amendment, now we have to approve the entire agenda.
The consent.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
No, the
You're
board-
right.
the
You're
board
correct.
agenda.
The board agenda. So we approve the addition to the agenda and the amendment. Now we should approve. Would you?
I move
make that motion?
the agenda be approved as amended.
Okay.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. All in favor of the motion to approve the amended agenda, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And now we move to item 9, the consent agenda. The consent agenda, I was planning to note, includes several letters commenting on our updated master plan. And we thank all of those residents who are reading that and in letting us and the Planning Commission know about their concerns and their interests. The consent agenda includes the minutes of our October 3, 2023 regular Township Board meeting, the board's bills, the Township Audit Services request for proposals is in there, assistance to firefighters grant, this is, okay. And item F is the Township Board meeting schedule for 2024. And item G is to set a public hearing date of November 9 for the township's application to MISHDA's Community Development Block Grant Program for housing improving living, local livability, or CHILL as it's called. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Tonight, I'd like to move the consent agenda with the exception of item F, which I'd like to discuss under our action items if possible.
Okay.
Support.
So the motion on the table at this point is to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 9F, which we'll pull out for discussion. Mr.
Thank you. I would like to make an amendment to the minutes, just a correction.
Okay.
On page 38, during my comments, it mentions Dr. Richard Ritter. It's actually Dr. Richard Witter with a W, if you'd make those changes. And he is a 50-year member of the Kiwanis Club of Hazlet and Okemos, if you'd make that change as well.
Okay, so now we have an amended consent agenda. would you accept
Yes.
that motion? Then we have to approve the consent agenda by a roll call vote.
Clerk Guthrie,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson,
Yes.
Trustee Wilson,
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski,
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson.
Yes. And now we come back to trustee Hendrickson's item 9F, the meeting schedule that you wanted to discuss.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. And I appreciate the work that goes into this. You'd think it would be as easy as simply putting these on every 2 weeks, but it does have a little more of a high wire act that goes into that. I would like to, I will eventually make a motion to this effect, but I'll explain why I asked for this first. I'd like to ask for 2 changes to our meeting agenda for 2024. The first is I'd like to move the Tuesday, May 7th meeting to Thursday, May 9th. May 7th is an election day in Ingham County. It's a special election, so it's not a guarantee. However, this election is one that the county likes to use to put on millages that are countywide. There's a decent chance, in fact, I'd say that there's a very good chance that there will be an election in every community in Ingham County on May 7th. So I would ask that we move that, as we often do, to the Thursday following the election, which would be May 9th. The second change would be the first meeting in August. I'd like to move to, from August 13th to, oh boy, I had this written down, August 8th, which is again the Thursday following the election. That would allow us to take up any important matters, including whether there are any initiatives that need to be placed on the ballot prior to the certification deadline in place for ballot initiatives.
For November.
For November.
Right.
The 13th would be too late for us to consider anything like that, and I'd like to give us the opportunity to do that if we need to. So 2 changes, May 7 to May 9, and August 13 to August 8. And so, with that said, I would like to move the adoption of the 2024 Township Board meeting schedule resolution with 2 amendments, moving Tuesday, May 7th to Thursday, May 9th, and moving Tuesday, August 13th to Thursday, August 8th.
Support.
Supported by, I believe I heard trustee Wilson first.
Yep.
Yes. Comments, Mr. DeShane?
Thank you. I have no problem with those 2 changes. They make a lot of sense to me, but it seems logical. We also move the Tuesday, August 27th meeting back to August 20th. It gives us some separation between that and the September 3rd meeting. Gives us more time for bills to be approved and gives us a better spacing of the meetings. I think we moved it to the 27th because we moved that meeting back. Well, now it's the first meeting is essentially in the first week of the month. So let's move the second meeting to the 3rd week of the month. So my proposal is to move the Tuesday, August 27th, 2024 meeting to Tuesday, August 20th.
Board members, Mr.
I have no issue with that, if that's
I don't have an issue.
So say support.
support.
You support that? Okay. So, we have,
So we should vote on Treasurer DeShane's amendment and then on my initial motion.
okay, we can do that. All in favor of Treasurer DeShane's amendment to move the August 27, 2024 meeting date back to August 20? All in favor of that motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right. Now, the first motion involved changing the May 7 date to May 9, and the August 13 date to Thursday, August 8 instead.
Yes.
No further comments. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Okay. Item 10, questions for the attorney. We have none tonight. We have no public hearings, which would have been item 11. And we come to item 12, action items. 12A is ordinance 2023-05. Oh, people are changing things on me that I'm reading. Redevelopment Ready Communities, RRC Housing Updates Introduction, Mr. Director Schmidt.
It wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
They don't give me that power.
We'll find out.
So the proposal in front of you this evening is to formally introduce the ordinance that we discussed at the last meeting. The Planning Commission has previously held public hearing on and recommended approval. So briefly, this is a combination of changes that largely, we've informally called them the RRC changes because a number of the changes are coming from the Redevelopment Ready certification program changes. But there are other changes. They are all related to housing generally. And so what this ordinance will do, briefly, is it will add an allowance for accessory dwelling units. This is probably the largest change. There are a number of conditions, and so this is not going to be a simple, we do it and everyone can put one up. This is going to take some time and some work, and I'm already getting pushback because people want to do more than this. So this is a good starting point. That tells me that we're at least starting in the right place if I've already got people trying to get around it. The ordinance would eliminate the minimum house size and minimum unit size in most districts. Again, this is a potential to assist with our housing stock, especially up around the lake where you have very small lots, and some of those lots are functionally not able to be built on without a number of variances. Staff identified somewhere around 90 lots in the township that are small enough that they would need some help. So this is a step in that direction. Additionally, we get the occasional call about a tiny house. My wife doesn't see the appeal, I do, but it's something that there are people that want to do this. So this would allow for that as well. In the multifamily district, multifamily units would now be permitted by right. That is something that should probably have always been there. There are a number of other things that will probably trigger a special use permit with respect to that, but the actual use itself is permitted in the district in which it's named. One of the other major change is that to address the requirements of the Corridor Improvement Authority, second floor residential units will be permitted in the C2 and C3 district. That is the commercial districts that encompass the CIA area. This is, again, has to have a first floor of commercial to get a second floor of residential. And so it's unlikely that we're going to see a lot of these. We have gotten a couple of calls about some unique properties in Hazlitt, actually, that are older properties that you'd more likely, probably was that way back in the day, and they converted over time. But this is more of a longer term thing as we start to look at redevelopment within the CIA area. And that is required by the CIA Act, that this be permitted in those districts. So rather than write a completely new zoning district to cover the CIA area, we took the easy way and just put it in the zoning districts where we would allow it. That is what this ordinance does. What you're being asked to do this evening is introduce it. Formally, should the board approve the introduction, staff will publish it as required and bring it back to you for formal adoption at your next meeting.
Okay. Trustee Wazinski.
I'll move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction zoning amendment number 2023-05 to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian at multiple sections to bring the zoning ordinance in line with the RRC program guidelines.
Trustee DeShane. Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. I would like to thank our directors for bringing this to us. I think this is very innovative. I have a strong passion for affordable housing, and within affordable housing, I think aging in place should be a part of that. Took care of my mom for over a year. She lived in a unit that she could afford because she's on a fixed income, and couldn't move her closer. So I spent a year traveling back and forth, and it's exhausting, and I couldn't be there as much as I wanted. So I think that in itself, in addition to just making sense, this is a fantastic ordinance, and I thank you, and I support it 100%.
And Mr. DeShane.
I too support it, and along the same lines of affordable housing, one of the things we're likely to be asked about for the CIA approval of the TIF will be what are our efforts along the corridor to encourage affordable housing, and certainly adoption of this ordinance moves us in the right direction.
Okay. Other board members? Comments? No further comments? Trustee Wilson.
I'm a member of the Homeowners Board of Indian Hills Homeowners Association, and there is great interest, and I'm sure there is from other subdivisions, about having this kind of accessibility, and it's kind of a plus and minus sort of game. But in the long run, I agree with Trustee Wazinski that affordable housing is such a challenge in this community, and this is one way to really help us. It's not going to increase the use. I see in the ordinance that the one of the principal residents, one of the residences with an ADU may be rented, but not both of them. So that's going to lend a lot of comfort, I think, to people. And it is the ideal opportunity to have a family member that cannot live on their own be there, but also given their private space. So I think it's a wonderful idea. It's done in a lot of communities across the nation. So why not be innovative? Thank you.
Anyone else? Trustee, Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I just have a couple of questions. Can you explain, I think our viewers, maybe our viewers can hear us, I'm not really sure. Can you explain multiple family units by right?
So so the multifamily zoning district right now has a single use that's permitted, and that is single family houses. So by definition, or it's two family houses, I'm sorry, not one family, it's two family houses. So by definition, it's an awkward situation to have a zoning district where the use that the zoning district is established for is not permitted by right. We have a number of other things that are going to trigger a special use permit for a large scale project, and this is one of the things that Senior Planner Shorkey and Assistant Planner Chapman and I have been working on, is to get us down to one special use permit for a property, because trying to track multiple is extremely difficult. And I would argue things fall through the cracks. And so this sort of takes away this idea that for some reason, even though it's zoned multifamily, it's not appropriate for multifamily. If it's not appropriate for multifamily, we shouldn't zone it that to start with.
Can you give me an example? I'm just trying to understand this further.
So if someone wanted to build a 10,000 square foot, 8-unit building on a property that's already zoned multifamily, it's permitted. And as long as they meet the standards in the zoning ordinance, they can go forward.
So today, as it stands, they would have to come in and ask for a special use permit in order to do that.
That not only goes to the planning commission, it also goes to the board. It is a 6-month process.
Okay, so it's slowing down the process.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. And then for the last bullet point, you say in your memo, staff is recommending the removal of the public hearing requirement for site plans, which is not a way of doing public input. I mean, I understand you have to post notice of the public hearing and it takes longer. Are you not receiving public input at these public hearings?
So there's a couple of problems, and I apologize. I didn't mean to gloss over that one. I just forgot that one was in there. So there's two issues with this. One, yeah, we're not getting any input. No one comes to these meetings. We do all the work, and I can count. There's been one where we've had the neighbor come, because it was and all it was a lot split. It was just a very unique situation where it required an amendment, and so the neighbor came. And we had the Comcast rep show up to a couple of them on the commercial side, looking to drum up business. The problem is, when you get to this point in the process, a site plan is not a discretionary approval. It is an approval that if you meet the standards, it shall be granted under state law. So we have people potentially coming into the process at that point, thinking they can have an impact on it, and they really can't. We have to approve it if it meets the standards at that point. And so what we need to do as a staff, we need to do a better job of utilizing our website and utilizing our social media better to get the word out as projects get to that point. Because I think, trying to read the tea leaves from 1970, whatever, when this was established, that it seems like it was trying to address that gap between the project being approved by the planning commission and the board and then actually getting under construction. And so with modern technology, we shouldn't have that problem anymore. And so we need to do a better job of communication. That's going to be one of our goals for the upcoming year.
Are you required for these site plans, are you required to notify neighboring homes a certain distance?
So
Or is that for only certain?
So there is no requirement in the state law.
Okay.
Our ordinance requires that we notify adjacent property owners, but our ordinance also defines adjacent as not across the street. So in many cases, the only person that gets notified is the property owner of the project. And so it's a step that I have not seen in many communities, and I would not recommend we continue it.
Those are my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Supervisor. This ordinance does not allow multifamily housing in single-family districts.
Correct.
This multifamily housing change would occur only in, as I read it, RDD, RD, RC, and RCC.
Correct. Only the multifamily districts.
Right. And so I don't want there to be any confusion that all of a sudden in a neighborhood that's full of single-family homes, we're going to see this popping up by right. I think it might be helpful, we're approving this for introduction, so we will see this again. Maybe it would be helpful to have a map to show where in the township those districts are currently, so that we can just illustrate, to anyone who might have concerns about that, where that is at the moment. Would that be something we could pull together?
I can probably pull it together off the top of my head, but I'll double check that it's more than the one property I am aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask a question. When we say multifamily, Trustee Hendrickson has counted off, I think, 4 different districts that essentially are a multifamily. So my question is, does this ordinance allow any kind of multifamily or the several types of multifamily in all of the multifamily zoned districts?
So we treat, our ordinance is a little unique in that we treat our multifamily districts functionally all the same. The difference between them is just how many units are permitted by acre.
Okay.
And so anything that's permitted in RD is going to be permitted in RCC, and it's going to be across the board.
Okay.
But that doesn't get outside of that district. That district is its own sub-ordinance almost, because it's got its own set of rules.
Okay. So we can, what I'm really trying to get at is, can we look at an RDD zone district and possibly see duplexes, a mixture of duplexes and triplexes and quads?
Certainly.
And more?
Certainly.
Okay. That's what I needed to understand. Okay, any further questions? Mr. DeShane?
So if I'm reading this correctly, we will not see a separate ordinance for ADUs. This is going to be our ADU ordinance, correct?
Correct. This is the starting point for us. We do not anticipate bringing a separate ordinance forward.
A couple of questions on that. I'm glad you brought it forward, and I'm curious that you said you've heard a lot of interest by residents already about this ADU unit, and they're already looking to expand it. You want to say anything more about that kind of feedback you're getting?
No, so I mean, one of the things that, I found very quickly here was that these exist.
In
The
township.
trick is you don't put a kitchen in, because under the building code, then that is technically not a habitable unit. And so there's a number of places in the community where these exist as people have aged in place or built a new garage, a large garage, and so it had a substantial amount of second floor space. And so rather than try and find a loophole every time this question comes up, we talked internally and we're like, okay, we need to codify this in some way so that we can put guardrails around this question. We most often get it in one of two scenarios. It's not, I know people see the rental thing, it's not that usually, because the cost of building it is so much higher right now than what you're gonna get in rent. That's not what we see. We see one of two things. It's someone has aged in place or had a major accident or something and now needs a separate space. So that detached garage that is not a garage now, it's actually a living area, but it's flat and you can roll a wheelchair into it or a bed into it or something of that nature. Similar situation above the garage where you need to have mom move back in with us, but she wants a separate space, right? And so there's either an entrance in the garage upstairs, or you go into the house and then there's a door basically between the units. That's sort of scenario one. Scenario two is not as much a dwelling unit, but kind of gets there, is that people, especially now that COVID has happened and are working from home more, need a space that is quiet and separate from the kids to work and do their business. And that doesn't quite get there, but most of those people that are doing that tend to want to put a bathroom in, and then we start to get real skeptical that it's becoming a separate unit, and it becomes this back and forth discussion with them of, okay, what are you really doing with it? So those are the two scenarios. It's unlikely to be a scenario. It really is fairly unlikely that someone's going to build one of these to just rent it out, because the costs are just out of control right now.
Okay. And section K has the owner requirement to the owner either has to live in the primary residence or swap units, live in the ADU, and they can rent out the main home to a non-relative, but they have to stay occupied in the ADU.
They have to be on property.
Great.
That's the goal. And you'll note under sub P, our plan is to have this recorded as a deed restriction, so it runs with the property. And so if you buy a property from Claire Guthrie and she has an ADU, it's not just I can rent out 2 units. It's not a 2-unit property. It's I can live there and have a second space.
Got you. This is kind of square foot maximum. Where'd that number come from? Did you check other ordinances, or where'd you come up with that number at?
Roughly the size of a modern garage if you extend it to a second story.
Okay.
So modern garage, something that most people would accept in their neighborhood, 24 by 24, 20 by 30, somewhere around there. So if you extend that up to the second floor, 600 square feet is roughly what that's going to be.
Did you look at other ordinances, and did they have?
It is all over the place.
In terms of the square footage?
Some places have gone really small, 200, 400. Some places don't have a max. We think this is a reasonable starting point. If we see that this is not the answer, we'll be back. Mm-hmm. But to build bigger than this is getting pretty big. Because especially with a detached unit, that's the first floor is going to be a garage. Like, that's a big garage. It's going to take up a lot of space. So.
Okay. And then section Q, I appreciate leasing cannot be less than 30 days. You're trying to minimize the Airbnb use of this.
Correct.
Good. Thank you very much. Looks like I can support all of this, and I appreciate your thoroughness in drafting these changes for us.
Anyone else? Then the motion is to adopt the resolution approving for introduction zoning amendment 2023-05 to amend the zoning ordinance of the Charter Township of Meridian at multiple sections to bring the zoning ordinance in line with the RRC program guidelines. All in favor?
I think we need a roll
A roll call vote? Okay.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is item 12B. And we will hear about our early voting plan from Emily Gordon, who's the election administrator in Meridian Township.
Good evening, everyone. So in front of you, you have the the election plan for 2024 upcoming elections and potentially future elections. So with the passage of Proposal 2 in 2022, we are now required to have 9 days of early voting for each statewide and federal election. This will start the second Saturday before the statewide election or federal election and end the Sunday before. So we had to come up with a location for this early voting site. Clerk Guthrie and I toured several different spaces for that, including commercial spaces. We started at the Meridian Mall. We were looking for a centralized location. There are several different requirements such as ADA compliance, accessibility to be able to get into that space, as well as room to vote so that everybody can have a good voting experience, privacy while voting as well. So we toured several different spaces at the Meridian Mall. We didn't feel that any of those would be able to meet all of our requirements. We also toured a bank as well. With those different spaces, we would have to potentially sign a year-long lease, which would also leave us with a situation in a couple of years of having to find a new early voting space if those were rented out in the meantime. So with that, we decided to have our 9 days of early voting here in the Township Boardroom. So we will have our equipment set up here. We have an entrance and an exit where we truly feel we can conduct the flow very well and manage the lines. So we have the early voting plan that is required to be submitted to the county in this packet as well. As I stated, we talked at length about the expected turnout, the population density, public transportation. As you know, we have the new CATA bus covered stop outside, which is great for voters as well if we have weather, which we will have in February and potentially November. Accessibility, as far as being able to get in here, we have a very accessible entrance and exit. Time and travel, this is centrally located to everybody in Meridian Township. That was very important to us. Students, people in Okemos, Hazlet, East Lansing, we want to make sure that everybody is able to get here as well. We also took into consideration all of the staff. That is in the early voting plan. Part of early voting, we had to fill out a grant application for the state of Michigan that was submitted to the county, and the county is submitting that to the state. We're hoping that the whole entire grant is reimbursed. That includes equipment, staff costs, anything from voting booths down to scanners and bags that we'll need to store ballots in as well. We don't know how much of that will be covered, but we did submit, our plan for every single thing that we could possibly need. This also includes, the plan includes talking about the supervisor for the early voting site, which will be me, so that I'm able to, watch over everything that's going on here. We'll also still have our normal chair and co-chair, as well as everybody that works in a precinct. It's essentially a precinct for voting day for 9 days prior to the election. So with that, we had the Election Commission meeting last week. The Election Commission asked some questions and voted unanimously to pass this. We also have a resolution regarding early voting as well. So I can take any questions that you might have.
Board members. Am I seeing a hand up? Mr. DeShane.
What is our current registered voter total?
So we have currently registered 33,000 voters. However, as we know with the proposal that was passed in 2018, that can change up until 8 o'clock on election day and potentially beyond if voters are in line for a long amount of time. So with same-day voter registration, that can obviously change with MSU students and everything like that, so.
And with early mail-in voting, we'll probably have fewer at the polls than as we saw in the past two elections. But do you have an estimate of how many people will be using the early voting site those 9 days?
So that kind of, there's two questions in there. So we don't have guidance yet on if those ballots that we mail out are officially going to be able to be tabulated at the early voting site or not. There is potential that somebody could walk in with their ballot that we mailed out to them and they could say, I want to put it through a tabulator, which does happen quite a bit. People like to see their vote going through. So I think that would change a lot. If that is able to happen, I think that would change a lot of how many people actually come in just to tabulate their ballot. But we are planning for 33,000 voters because that's kind of all we know. I know the state is breaking things down into thirds. So a third of people will come on election day, a third of people will vote absentee, and then a third of people will come vote early. So we are planning for, we'll plan for line management and things like that. As of now, our hours will be 8 to 5, and there's potential that we could extend those hours as well.
So that would be 11,000 voters who would be coming through this early voting center.
That's correct, over the span of 9 days.
Over the 9 days, that's still 1,200 or so voters a day, 1,200 or so voters a day. Can this room handle that?
So we are planning for 4 tabulators to be set up. We'll have the whole room filled with voting booths and 4 check-in stations at a time. And then we also, the state and our voting systems, Dominion voting systems, have come up with ballot on demand. So we will be putting in for ballot on demand, which means a ballot can be printed right away. And that will also cut down on time as well. The new tabulators from Election Source from Dominion, they tabulate ballots in, I believe they said 3 to 5 seconds, which is much faster than any other ballots have been tabulated. So the thought is for line management, cutting down on the amount of time that it takes for a voter to get their ballot, check in, get their ballot, and then fill out their ballot and tabulate their ballot. We kind of have come up with plans for the flow of everything to make sure that people get in, and then as well as the amount of time it takes for them to actually be in here as well.
You're the experts and you've done your estimates in this, but quite honestly, this seems like we're really going to be testing the capacity of this room with 1,200 voters a day. Those are my thoughts initially.
And I would like to say as well, if we get, if there's a situation where it does not work, we can always adjust after the February election. However, we believe that this would definitely be able to handle the line and everything in that period of time. And then potentially, like I said, extending the hours as well would be another option. And we also are required to do 9 days, but that doesn't mean that we can't extend the amount of time further from 9 days if we need to as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I appreciate the treasurer's concerns. 1,200 voters a day is 150 an hour, right? And the idea, of trying to fit 150 people not only in this room but also lined up. It's going to be cold. It's going to be February. They're going to want to be inside. We're going to have a spot for them. So I'm sure that's part of the plan. Human behavior also tells us that we're going to have, despite 9 days being available, people are going to come on that last weekend in droves. And so I'm concerned that it's not going to be 1,200 voters a day. It's going to be a couple hundred, and then all of a sudden we're going to have several thousand showing up on that Saturday and that Sunday. And being prepared to handle all that is going to be very, very important. I got the benefit of, seeing these early voting plans from a number of different communities around the county and around the state. Lansing is planning on having 4 early voting centers, and they've got 85,000 registered voters. I am concerned that we're having just one. And I think that we're going to learn a lot. You're absolutely right in bringing up the point that, February will be a learning experience, not only for Meridian, but for everyone. And maybe Lansing will discover that it's actually 2 that they need. And maybe we'll discover that it's actually 2 that we need. And having that wiggle room to amend this plan going into August and November, I think is going to be very important. But I think being prepared for overflow people, especially in that last weekend, is going to be incredibly important.
So we also, another part of this is that we have spoken at length with the city of East Lansing, clerk and deputy, and we've also talked about potentially doing a satellite location for November in East Lansing because we have a large portion of students that are out there. Now, I come from East Lansing. I've worked those elections where we have lines out of the door and you're issuing ballots for 13 hours because students are waiting until the last moment. And then the unfortunate part is they find out after 8 o'clock on election night that they're actually a Meridian Township voter. So with that, we are really going to up our communication to those students in Hannah Plaza, in all of those places. And we would like to run voter registration drives going out to those specific places as well to make sure that we're targeting those students that end up in line in East Lansing. However, we also talked about doing a satellite location, and that wouldn't be an early voting center that we have to run an early voting center for 9 days there, but that would be something that we have the capability to issue absentee ballots for those students, and those students can turn them in there. And those ballots would be tabulated in our AV counting board. East Lansing runs at least one satellite location every year for a couple weeks, a week. It depends on what election it is. So it would be in conjunction with their satellite location as well.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. 2 years ago, I was not a poll watcher, but I was gathering statistics for a political candidate in East Lansing proper. And in the middle of the afternoon, there was quite a panic going on because there were 500 kids that kept coming to register to vote at the clerk's office there. And it was not, the assistance was not sufficient. And so this does concern me because people will be registering to vote at the same time that they're getting their ballot and voting on the spot. I think February is going to be a tremendous test, but I also think that the turnout in November is going to far, far exceed the primary and the presidential election. And we really, really have to take a look as to our adequacy of the process. Thank you.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I do want to say that that a lot of those problems are on election day, and you do have to do same-day voter registration at the clerk's office, and that our department has prepared for that and are preparing that. We're working with our IT department. We're working with Deputy Manager Dan Opsimer, and the whole redesign of our front area has allowed for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, like when you go to the Secretary of State's office and they're sitting in those high stools and greeting you, we have 5 of those now up at the front counter. We had 1 the last election, and I don't know, probably the same amount every other election before that. So we are preparing in advance for those same day voter registrations. I don't have the same concern in regards to 1,200 people coming in a day. What I see coming in, absentee ballots, is sort of what Trustee Hendrickson hinted to, is that, come Friday, I have 9,000 absentee ballots that we've received. Between Friday and Election Day, I will receive another 9,000 to 10,000 absentee ballots. If somebody wanted to come in and put their ballot through the tabulator instead of in the drop box, they may come in and see a line and say, nope, ain't gonna do that, and put it in the drop box, you know, and not want to wait. You may have people that say, oh, I want to try to put my absentee ballot, let's see what it's like, and put it in the tabulator instead. We don't have many voters who come to the township who have issues with dropping off their absentee ballot, wanting to know how it's tracked, wanting to know that it was scanned in the system, wanting to follow it. We don't have a ton of people like that, and I think that is the reason why early voting was passed, so that people who wanted to do that could see it be fed through the tabulator. I'd have to ask our security team, but we probably had half a dozen people in the last general election who had issues with it, and I knew 3 of the people and was able to explain it to them, and they were fine after that. But we shall see. Like Emily said, there's no one really knows what's going to happen and what the turnout will be. Nobody knows. You know, if we had a large community center that we could put all these this early voting site in, it would be great, you know, but we really don't have a space, and we did our due diligence. And I want to thank Emily for putting together the early voting plan and putting together the grant application and submitting it to the county. It's about $53,000 for just early voting, because you can't use the same equipment as you use for election day. So yeah, nobody really knows what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be 1,200 people a day, though. But I can eat my words. Who knows? We don't know.
Trustee Wazinski?
Great conversation. I am wondering, so do we have the statistics on how many absentee voters we have in Meridian versus how many go to the polls? I mean, you mentioned that state of Michigan's averaging a third.
Yeah, I know.
Does Meridian follow that?
I would have to pull the numbers on that, but I know that over 95% of the people who get an absentee ballot return their absentee ballot. So we have a huge return rate on the absentee ballots, but I would have to check and see what the actual numbers are on how many people get absentee ballots.
From my recollection, it's 17,000, but in a general election, we could receive over 25,000 absentee ballots. That's just who's on the permanent list. And switching from one kind of list to another kind of list, I don't know how many people are going to actually make the switch to be on the automatic mail ballot list from the current list that they're on. So those numbers could change. But in the end, it's a large number of absentee voters here in Meridian Township.
And I have one follow-up question, Supervisor. So how many currently voters are assigned to each poll?
Precinct.
Precinct, thank you.
It depends on the precinct.
What's the range?
Around 1,200 average, except for there are some very small precincts.
I believe it
There's
can't
3 very
exceed-
small precincts, otherwise it's around 12 to 1,800 depending on the precinct.
I believe it
On
can't
average.
exceed 2,000, so,
29.99.
almost, yeah.
And that's,
Can't exceed,
that
yes.
would be one day. So we have one day of 2,000, let's say 1,500. One day in a regular precinct, as opposed to, let's give them a third at 11,000 over 9 days. I mean, it says, I'm asking because I don't know, and I haven't worked the polls.
Yep.
But how we manage that? Like, does this seem like this is something that is a similar manageable event here? I mean, I'm asking you that. I know you've already thought about it or you wouldn't be here. But just thinking that through based on all the comments, because good points.
So in a normal precinct, you have one check-in station where you have the EPB. I don't believe even if you run two laptops, you have potentially 2 check-in stations, but one person issuing ballots, one person giving out the applications to vote, one person checking them, one person giving out the ballots, one tabulator, one person. So it's like a kind of a 1-1-1. Everybody has a station. Here, we would have 4 stations that can issue any precinct ballots. We would have 4 tabulators that can issue precincts 1 through 5, or 6 through 11, that kind of thing. And then we'll have voting booths that can handle any of them. So lines would be, you know, they'd be coming by 4s instead of 1. You know, if you're in a precinct, a normal precinct, it's 1 line up to the station to get your ballot. And then there's maybe, you know, 10 voting booths, 1 tabulator, that kind of thing. So in this, it'll be 4 check-in stations and ballot on demand. So it's printed off specifically for you, and then for your precinct, and then given to you to tabulate at that point.
And you can vote at the VAT.
Oh, yes. And then another thing that is highly underutilized are the voter assist terminals as well. So those are the ones that, you know, are basically the giant iPads. A lot of people don't know that that's just a giant ballot marking device. I prefer to use I love the VAT. I'm a big advocate for it. It's for visually impaired. It also has audio. We have an ATI device, which has Braille on it as well. However, anybody can use that, and it to mark your ballot, it prints off your fully marked ballot, and you go and tabulate that. So that's another option too. If lines are long, things like that, somebody can use that as well. And then I did just want to circle back to Trustee Wilson. Anybody that will be registering to vote on Election Day, which is what those lines were in East Lansing, are those who are registering to vote and get their absentee ballot, those are taken care of in the clerk's office. So that will not even be allowed in here. So if somebody is not registered to vote, they will be coming to the clerk's office. So that cuts down a lot, you know, with our student population and things like that as well. But also something that can be handled at a satellite office, so.
Mr. Duchesne.
You mentioned a grant we've applied to with the county clerk. Is that to pay for the cost of the early voting site?
Ideally, yes. So we had, we filled that out. Basically, it was every single thing that you could hope for, and we're waiting to see how much is actually given to that effect. So we put in for our 4 electronic poll books, which are the laptops. We put in for 4 tabulators. We put in for 4 ballot on demand systems. We put in for voting booths, scanners,
Staffing?
Yes, staffing is a huge expense. The state is paying up to $15 an hour for staffing, and that's just baseline. So any chairs or co-chairs will pay beyond the $15 an hour as well.
The question, follow up to your initial search of locations, if you found after February you needed to expand to a 2nd or 3rd location, did you find suitable locations that would be acceptable if you decided that 1 is not enough?
I'll defer to Clerk Guthrie. Not
at this time.
There's not many options available. We have certain laws we have to follow as to even who we could rent from if we did rent from them. Certain, you know, if they can't be politically involved or involved in any political action committees, things like that as well. So that could be any sort of landlord, things like that. We have to be conscious of if we did, you know, expand and decide to do a 2nd location. We could have different spots in East Lansing, but they would be on the East Lansing side in conjunction with East Lansing as well. So that was offered to us, but we think that this would suffice, so.
And the business owners said, if we're able to lease this and sell it, we're gonna do that above having an early voting center here. And I don't blame them for that. And that was a big impetus for us to say this is not an option, because we would not want to prevent a business from leasing their property. And we would want to be consistent with our voters so they have a consistent place to go. So
And when we visited the mall, really the only option that we found that was suitable, and I'm using suitable lightly, was the old Hollister store. And I don't know how many of you have been in there, but it's tight. There's a very interesting flow to the store. It's also pretty dark in there. It's just not, and it's also very far in from any entrance. So anybody that may have a walker, a cane, a disability of any sort, it would be hard for them to get there as well.
It would be a big hit with our 20 and 30-year-old voters. They know that location well.
Okay. I have, were you?
I was just gonna make the motion.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask this question. You mentioned that you needed different equipment for the general election than you use for the early election?
Yes, did you want to?
Early
Sure.
voting?
Yep, so in accordance with the new state law, we have to use separate equipment because those tabulators, the totals cannot be run on the tabulators until 8 p.m. on election night, as with the regular tabulators. So they have to be stored securely every night, but Sunday night specifically, they're stored securely. When we come back on election day after polls close, we have a team that's going to be here that will be able to close the polls on those tabulators, print off the tapes like you normally would in a normal voting polling location. So because of that, we cannot reuse any of the early voting center equipment. So we will have to get all new early voting center equipment. So that's what's included in the grant. So yes.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have a motion yet?
No, you don't.
Can make it.
Kurt Guthrie.
I move to approve the Meridian Township early voting plan and early voting site by resolution at the October 17, 2023 Township Board meeting, and direct the clerk to submit the early voting plan and resolution to the county clerk by October 30th, 2023.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. And one more clarification. This is a recommendation from the Election Commission.
The Election Commission recommended that the Township Board approve this.
Right.
While we don't have to do that, we typically have gone to the Election Commission and had them make a recommendation. And if there were any changes, we would do it at that meeting.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the early voting plan and the early voting site. By resolution, we need a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes,
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
thank you. We now move to item 12C, Meridian Township Investment Policy Update, to be presented by Mr. DeShane.
Thank you. We discussed this at our previous meeting, and the board had made two suggestions for changes, both of which I've incorporated them. Those are fund types. The fund types listed under section 2.1 are the fund types currently utilized by the township, with the ability to add or detract funds as the board determines based on what we hear from our finance director. The second one is signatures on bank cards. We had listed the deputy treasurer as a signatory, and we removed the deputy treasurer and added instead the township supervisor, township manager, treasurer are the four signatories, which is our current practice as well. To repeat, the reason for this new or revised investment policy, one is it gives a better exposition of what these policies are, including a glossary of terms, which I think is really useful for those of us that don't deal with these terms on a daily basis. It limits maturities to 5 years, which is a much needed change and would have helped me if it were in place 20 years ago. It also limits maximum percentages by class. The only thing we could have unlimited amounts would be treasury bills. Everything else is between 50 and 20%, depending on type. So I'm glad to answer any questions that people may not have had last time, but it's essentially an update to the policy the board adopted in 2009 and has been readopted ever since then. This is the first revision of anything since 2009.
Can I find it? Do we have one?
But if you're looking for it, it's on page 82 of the packet.
Is there a motion?
I don't.
I can make the motion. It was left off the memo. I apologize. That's what you're looking for.
That's what we're looking for.
Okay, I move to adopt the 2023 investment policy with revisions as presented to the board.
Support.
Supported by trustee Wazinski this time. Any further comments? Then we should have a roll call vote. Ms. Gordon?
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie?
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Thank you. We now come to our discussion items. The first one, since we amended our agenda, will be the will it be an introduction to the Meridian Township Public Safety Recruitment and Retention Program. Mr. Walsh will begin this presentation.
Thank you, and I appreciate, I don't come to you lightly this evening. This is a significant issue for the township and for our community. Over the last few weeks, since Chief Grillo, and I want to preface my comments tonight, nothing that we're doing tonight or recommending has anything to do with prior administration. This is not on anybody else. Retired Chief Plaga made every effort to fill our ranks. And it did pretty well. We just haven't been able to get to that number of 41 or 42 full-time officers. But we're at a desperately low number. Today we're at 32. Almost a crisis stage for our police department. Our fire department, under Chief Hamill's leadership, has been fortunate and has hovered right around, the full capacity number is 34. In January, it'll become 36 due to the board's actions. Right now, I think we're hovering around 32, 33, somewhere in there. So the issues across the board, but it's really predominantly in the police department right now. I won't belabor the point. I know you have a lot to go through tonight, so I'm going to turn over right away to Chief Grillo to go through and outline the problem, and then I have a recommendation to the board for you to consider this evening. So Chief Grillo.
Thank you, Manager Walsh. Give me half a second here to get hooked up, because I have a PowerPoint. I'll start by saying this. I enjoy coming and talking to everybody in the board. I truly do enjoy it. However, I'd like to be anywhere but here tonight talking to you guys about this. I'm going to use some verbiage that's probably, it makes me uncomfortable to use it. It's probably going to be uncomfortable to hear. Manager Walsh used the word crisis. I'm using the word dire. Crisis. We've got a problem with our staffing. Now, the staffing problem isn't necessarily unique to Meridian Township. A lot of agencies are having similar problems. However, that makes it even more difficult for us to recruit. The number of qualified candidates for the positions that are available are much smaller than they were in the past. Now, I will say the reason I took this job, and I've said this several times, and I'm going to continue to say it, is because I have a phenomenal staff. The officers that I do have are top-notch. The records employees I have are top-notch. My cadets are top-notch. One thing that we haven't sacrificed throughout the years is the quality of candidates, and I will not. We have a standard that we have set, and we will not go below that standard just to fill positions. However, we are at a spot where we need to do something, and we need to do something sooner rather than later, because I guess I'll go through my PowerPoint and show you what I mean. When I started in 2003, we had 46 officers sworn. Now, when I give you this number, this means everybody from the chief right down to the officers that are in training. In 2009, we had 42 officers. We took 13,500 calls for service. We wrote 5,500 citations, and our population was right around 38,000. In 2022, we were down to 35 officers. We took 18,000 calls for service. Now, an increase of 5,000 calls for service. Our citations dropped by almost 80%. Population grew to 43,000. So there's a direct correlation between the number of officers, calls for service, the population growing up, and as we've all heard at the listening sessions, the citations, the issues that we have with traffic. A call for service takes significantly longer than a traffic stop. I can clear a traffic stop in 5 to 10 minutes. It takes me an hour, 2 hours, sometimes an entire shift to get through a call for service. It takes more officers to go through calls for service. With the current numbers that I have, it's very difficult for me to continue traffic enforcement in the manner that the township deserves, in the manner that we would like to do so. So talking about my overtime line item, I go back to 2009. We had an $85,000 budget. We only used $65,000 of that. Fast forward to 2022. We had $80,000 in our line item there. We used $163,000, so we more than doubled our allotted amount for overtime. We had to come for a amendment. 2023 is even worse. We're looking at probably close to triple our allotted budget, and that's not because officers are out there, trying to get overtime. My minimum staffing for every shift is 3 officers and 1 sergeant. That means that's the least that we can have on the road. In the past, when I was a night shift sergeant, I had 5 officers assigned to me as a sergeant, so if 1 or 2 people were gone, we still could meet minimum staffing. Today, I have 3 officers assigned to each platoon. So if 1 person is missing because they're sick, they wanted a day off, they're away at training, we have to backfill with overtime.
Sure.
So where are we getting our officers? Over the past 5.5 years, we've hired 33 people. 12 of those, I'll take that back. 14 of those people were sponsored. 13 of them applied on their own, and 6 were recruited through various police academies by myself when I would go out and coordinate or teach classes. So where are they now? 15 of the 33 are still employed. So we've lost 18 of them to various different, for various different reasons. Some did not make it through our training process. Some we had to let go. Some left for just life circumstances, better fit, better pay. And on top of that, we've had seven additional officers that did not retire, like Chief Palaga retired, 7 additional officers that left before retirement for other jobs for a variety of reasons. So what have we done? Academy sponsorship has been one of our best places to go to find people. However, I guess I'll show you at the bottom here that our success rate with Academy sponsorship. It costs approximately $9,000 for the training and equipment to put somebody through the police academy. On top of that, we pay our recruits $17 an hour, so they make a wage, and that equals somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000. So of the 14 sponsored recruits, we only had to pay the tuition for 5 of them. The department's done an excellent job of finding alternative methods through different grants, through Michigan Works, to pay the tuition for our sponsored candidates. So of the 9 recruits, tuition was paid for with Michigan Works money for 5 of them. 2 of them were paid by an MCOLS grant that's ongoing that I'm still using right now. And there were 2 others that just paid their own tuition, and we gave them a salary while they were in the academy. So in all, we've saved $81,000 in tuition and equipment for our sponsored recruits. And again, as I'll explain later, I've got more that we'll be saving by putting more through the academy. However, of those 14 recruits, 6 are still employed with us and 2 are still in the police academy. The rest either failed training or left for other jobs while they were in the field training process. What else have we done? We removed, as you all know, we removed several steps on the wage scale. We moved the officers up to incentivize them. We also added 5% to the officers and the command staff's wages. We've also made many needed improvements to the building, including new locker rooms, new flooring is coming, access control, and several other things. So what's the staffing outlook? Currently we have 32 officers. We are authorized for 42. We have 32. 2 of those officers are in field training, so they don't, we're paying them, but they don't really count. They're not an extra body on the road yet. I have 2 employees that are eligible for retirement, actually 3, because Captain Crane is eligible for retirement next year. I've got confirmation from 2 of them that they will be leaving next year. I have 2 recruits in the police academy, so that's kind of a wash. I can plan on having about 32 at the start of next year. So what's the outlook? I have 4 recruits who have accepted conditional job officers to attend police academies this fall and winter, and I have a 5th recruit who's in the background process right now. And we also have 2 certifiable candidates that are in the background process as well. I don't know what the success rate will be of these candidates. I like to think that every single one of them will make it through all of their training. However, when I talk about the recruits that are in the police academy, they are not going to be solo performing officers until probably around a year from now, because they still have to start the police academy, get through it. Then they have to go through about 4 to 5 months worth of training in the field with us before we let them go on their own. So as I look to the future, for this next year, it's going to be rough if I don't get lateral transfers. Now, a lateral transfer is a already sworn police officer from another agency that applies here. In order for me to fill this gap that I have right now, I would like to target those lateral transfers. The other thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we keep the officers that we currently have. If we don't incentivize them to stay, if I lose any more, I can't stress it highly enough, we are at a critical point right now, and I need help. And it pains me to ask you for help, because that's just not in us as police officers. Generally, we aren't the people who are asking for help. We're the people that are there to help. But I'm asking you for help today. We have some incentives for our lateral transfers that we hope will make a difference. And so I'm here to present the problem. Manager Walsh is here to present the solution.
Thank you, Chief Bill. I also want to acknowledge Captain Crane, who's in the room this evening. He also spent a lot of time in putting this all together. What you're hearing tonight is a result of 3 or 4 meetings that we have had together over the last 3 weeks, culminating in this evening. So the mission statement of this whole program that's been put together, which has been a joint effort, is, and I won't read it to you, but it's basically to enhance our department and become safer for the community. There's 2 things that I think will help get us there, and these are not, I think they're great ideas, they're not my ideas. They're the ideas of the police leadership that put this together. So the first program is an inexpensive program, and it's the recruitment part of this. And without getting down into the details too far tonight, because we'll bring this back to you, but suffice to say that it's a recruitment program that includes the police department and the fire department. And it has to be different in how it's paid out. It's $5,000 for either our police officers or firefighter paramedics if they bring somebody into the department and they're successful. So, but it's very different, because in a police officer, you have stages of getting hired, and you go through the FTO, and then you go out on the road. In the fire department, there's different ways. We're hiring right now, we're hiring EMTs, going into paramedic school, or we're hiring paramedics and having them, but we could hire somebody who doesn't have F1 and F2 for firefighting. So there's a bunch of different ways. I won't get down in the minutia this evening. Suffice to say that it's not $5,000 paid up front to the recruiting officer or the recruiting paramedic. It's spread out over time to make sure that it's an investment that's wise for us as well, that the person that we recruit, there's some matrix or toll gates along the way to make sure that they're successful. The details are in here. I won't go over those this evening, but suffice to say, I think they're well laid out by our leadership. The other one is a much more costly venture. It's a retention bonus program, and that one's pretty simple. If you're a full-time uniformed police officer or a full-time paramedic or EMT in the fire department, every July 1st, beginning in 2024, through 2026, so there'll be 3 payments. You'll receive a $5,000 retention bonus if you're with us. The numbers that we currently have, and this does not include, I've excluded both of the chiefs from this process for, I think, appropriate reasons. So you're looking at approximately 76 to 78 in numbers, rounded up to 80. You're looking at about a $400,000 cost per year. And then, of course, the question becomes, how do we pay for it? There's a couple of ways to pay for that. I don't think this is, yeah. There's a couple ways to pay for it. I'll stick to the recommended way that we're focused on this evening. If by chance that doesn't meet with your approval, there is another way to look at this, although I think the one that we're recommending tonight is certainly what we think is the way to go. And that is, for a number of years, going back 6 years at least, we've had a Meridian redevelopment fund. It's had $1.25 billion in it, and it hasn't been touched. Instead of going into any of our fund balances, because remember the 7.5 and the 3.2 in the project fund and the 2.2 in the pension stabilization fund, those are excluded or separate from this $1.2 million. That $1.2 million is a separate fund. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to be recommending to you when you're ready to vet this program is that $1.25 million be assigned to this program. So basically, it's $400,000 for 3 years, $1.2 million, and another $50,000 or so. It'll be more than that. We hope. We hope. Yeah. We really hope that it works. And we can't stand up here tonight and say we can guarantee or promise that this is going to work. But the public safety of this community is in front of all of us tonight. It really is. And I don't want to be dramatic about it, but I want to be dramatic about it. It's very serious. And I appreciate the way that the board members have approached this. Let's get it on the agenda. Let's get it on right away, and let's look at this. So 2 programs, a recruitment component of it, which there's many details to that. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And the other component is a $5,000 retention bonus. The estimated cost of this program over 3 years is about $1.2 to $1.3 million. We have the money set aside to help pay for it. The first question that would come up is, what happens if there's a development that comes in and requests that $1.25 million? I would say we've made a verbal commitments over the last 5 years that there's funds set aside in the capital project fund or out of the general fund that we could pay for it. We could keep our word. That's okay. We can keep our word to the developers. So that's the program. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. We also have, I've also asked both Chief Hamill and Chief Girdle to set up some toll gates that in 6 months we review where we're at. Is this working? Why is it working? Let's talk to our team. And then in 12 months, because if we're not successful in 6 or 12 months, we've got to figure out something different. And I don't know what that is tonight. I'm not smart enough about law enforcement or fire protection, but these guys and their leadership are, and we'll come up with something. But I strongly believe, I think both chiefs believe, and the administration of both departments believes that this will be successful. So thank you for your attention. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. DeShane.
First question I have is, first of all, thank you for bringing this to the board. And this is a crisis. We're here in our listening sessions. The lack of citations has caused a lot of anxiety with our residents about traffic throughout the township. And this gives us the hard data as to why we're writing 25% of the tickets we were 10 years ago. And so more and more bad driving is being tolerated and has upset our residents. My question is this enough? And if the board gave you 1.6 million or 2 million over 3 years, what more could you do? Would more money help ensure the success of this program?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we really wish we had a 100% answer for you this evening. We believe this will work. But again, in 6 months, we're going to come back and review this and see where we're at. And if it hasn't made swung the pendulum in the way that we hope it does. We'll have to come back to you and figure that out. But we really believe that the model we set up, if you're 29 years old, you've been with the department for 3 years, and you're making $60,000 a year, you're looking at a potential of $10,000 in 1 year. If you can go out and find someone to bring them into our department, that's $5,000, and then you're going to get your $5,000 retention bonus. You're looking at a $10,000 bonus in 1 year. We believe that'll have an effect. But we also believe that the people who have been here a number of years, for instance, Captain Crane, others, we believe that they've stuck with us, they've been with us through thick and thin, and that we also believe that they should be recognized in the retention. Our real concern is not the people who have been here 10 to 24 years. Our concern is the people who have been here from 1 to 3, 1 to 5 years is where our concern is.
Trustee Wazitsky.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. Sorry to cut, Trustee.
You're next.
I also thank you for putting so much time and effort into this. We did hear at the listening sessions, not only are people have a lot of anxiety, but we've had a lot of events lately that we hope that if we could have more police officers, that may have helped. Question is there another community that's tried something similar, and what were their results?
Yeah, there are other communities that have tried similar, these retention bonuses, if we want to call it that. I can't tell you what their results were. I can tell you that the monetary amount has been pretty significant. This is a significant amount as well. I can't tell you what their retention rate has been, though, how successful they've been. And it just varies from community to community how much departments are approaching this from different ways. Some of them are using these bonuses. Some of them are using other ways. They're opening contracts and things like that. We have several months to make sure that this is what works, right? And as the manager said, we are going to review this in a few months, and we will make a determination if this is what's appropriate. But I feel confident that this will be successful.
One follow-up question?
Yeah, please.
So reviewing it makes sense, evaluation. Do you think 6 months is enough to implement?
So.
And is 6 months going to get us, enough data to where we can actually make?
I guess we'll see. We discussed several benchmarks. We discussed 6 months and then again at the 12-month stage. So we'll discuss it several times over this period, and we'll see if we're gaining any traction here. And if we're not, then we will revisit and come up with a new plan.
And I would expect you would bring that back to the board and keep us posted.
Ma'am, absolutely.
Excellent. I am in support overall. Thank you.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you.
If you may, just one follow-up to that before. I think it's really important that we bring back quarterly, not wait till 6 months. You'll receive a quarterly report from us as to how the program's going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. How's morale?
Morale's okay. They're tired. They're tired. I mean, they're working a lot. They don't complain. Okay, but you can see it in their eyes that they are tired.
Sure. And
they need a break. We do our best to make sure that we don't have to cancel anybody's vacation. I think over the summer, I don't think Captain Crane had to cancel anybody's vacation time. We always filled it with overtime because, this week they may have a couple days off. The next week they know they're going to work 60, 70 hours. They're tired.
Yeah. I think like everyone who's been plugged in and aware of, how things are going, I acknowledge and agree that we're in pretty dire straits right now. I do have a couple of concerns, and I want to address them now before we commit ourselves to anything. So, first and foremost, what did you find when you assembled your wage matrix that compared presumably Meridian Township against other local municipalities for police wages and benefits across whatever region you chose.
I didn't use benefits, I just used wages, and I can say we're below average.
Okay, and this is even after the board's action to eliminate the 2 steps, add the 2 steps, add the 5% increase, plus the 3% increase. That's how far we were behind.
That's correct, and, the reason being is, everybody's in such strong competition right now. So as contracts are coming up, wages are being renegotiated, and that's the way that, some of the other agencies, their wages are raising. Now, we have a 3% increase each year, which is nice, but to answer your question, starting wage is pretty close to average. The top wage is quite a bit below average. Yes.
Okay. So I guess as a corollary to that, since those changes were made, that was last summer, right? Mm-hmm. Since those changes were made last summer, did you see an uptick in effectiveness in recruiting at all?
It's hard to say because it seems like applicants kind of come in waves. They come and go. Over the summer, we were getting our applications for recruits who wanted to go to the police academy. So these are sponsored recruits. I get an application in August to go to the January academy. They don't get out till May. They're not any good to me till October of the following year. So you're looking at 14 months. So it certainly, I can't imagine that it hurt because in our past wage scale, our starting wage was $19 an hour. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about somebody who you expect has a bachelor's degree, is going to be a professional and meet our standards. That makes it nearly impossible. So those steps that we took were definitely helpful. Absolutely.
Okay. When someone leaves, we sponsored people through the academy, they choose to go somewhere else. And I appreciate the data that you did provide. Does the police department conduct exit interviews not only for those individuals, but also for people who are leaving service after having been in the department for a while?
Sure. So some of them voluntarily choose to come in and speak with, it would have been Chief Palaga at the time. One of them in particular that left when he was in step 2 after we'd sent him through the police academy, hired him, he started, there are 4 steps in the training process. He was in step 2 and he decided that he was going to go work for a different agency. He came in and we did talk about, what his reasoning was.
Were there any trends that you could gather as to why some of these folks are not working out?
Some of them leave for working out. Do you mean like they're failing training, or they just aren't staying with us?
They're choosing not to come to work for us after all.
Yeah. So some of them just can't make it through our just don't meet our standards. Others, when they leave, some of them are for family reasons. They want to be closer to family. The young man I was talking about a moment ago, he said, I'm going to this specific agency because they give me a veteran bonus. They give me, they've got nice facilities. I'm going to make a good wage, and they've got better equipment. And honestly, it broke my heart to hear him say that because I took that pretty personally. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So you said in the presentation that your intention was to target lateral transfers. How do you think that this plan will help to actually tackle the idea of bringing someone in laterally from other places? Because it sounds to me like, this one-time $5,000 bonus to a current member of our staff isn't going to be any real incentive to someone that's in another department right now if we are actually out of sync with the wages and benefits that other departments are offering. So
one thing that other agencies have done, and I'll be honest with you, I stole this idea, was a lateral transfer matrix. What it does is it allows me to let a lateral transfer know where exactly they're going to start on the pay scale. So they aren't necessarily starting at the step 1 wage. And we need to, if we have to hire somebody and put them through the police academy, start them fresh. We have no idea how they're going to do. This is somebody who's already proven themselves, they have training, and we compensate them appropriately for that training. So in the past, it was kind of arbitrary how we would decide where we'd start people on the pay scale who came in with prior experience. Now I'll have a program that is very specific. So when we advertise it, somebody can say, oh, okay, I've got 5 years of experience. I'm a crime scene investigator. I have this and that. This is where I will be starting in their pay scale. And then you add on top of that the $5,000 bonus. And that kind of is the big splash that we're looking for, the kind of the way that we can attract our candidates.
Okay. And then what happens in year 4? Right, because this is, it's great. I worried that the retention bonus that we would be putting into place if we approve what's presented before us would frankly only serve to kick the can down the road 3 years. If that's indeed what the sticking point is. If that $5,000 makes all the difference in the world, is that something that, I feel like I need to ask the question.
Yeah, sure, and you're entitled to ask any question you want. And it's a good question, and we've talked about that, and the answer is, we don't know. The truth is, I'd love to be focused on 2026 or 2027 right now, but right now I got to focus on the immediate need. And we think that getting back to the $5,000 recruitment bonus, we think that is an additional incentive, because we may think we're going to get to 38 or 39, and this department could be at 25 or 26 if we don't take care of the people who are here. And so that's why that $5,000 recruitment opportunity is a real nice, attractive program for the people who are here. Like I said, someone could get an additional 10 grand in 1 year. So to answer your question directly, Mr. Trustee, is that I don't know where we're going to be in 4 years. I do know that this aligns with our contract negotiations, which come up in 2026. So at the end of this program, we'll enter into contract negotiations, and I'm sure those are going to be very challenging. And we'll have to see where we're at that point. But way before that, if we're not making the progress that we need to make, we'll be back in front of you, because this is like Chief Grillo said, this is affecting every department, and it's kind of right now it's kind of a race to the bottom.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And with regard to the recruitment bonus, I worked in the tech space, which is also highly competitive, for a while, and we offered a similar bonus to our staff to bring in people in the community that they knew of, that they were in groups with or meetups with, whatnot. What we found is, because it was so competitive, it's a chronically understaffed field, they were already looking for people to come join. The $5,000 wasn't really an incentive so much. It was a nice cherry on top of what they were already do. If they're as tired as they say, they're out there talking to people, come work with us. They're already incentivized to do this. Not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying I think that the $5,000 recruitment bonus may be just icing on the cake for something that they're already very motivated to do anyway.
Yeah, well, just so you know, because I think this may have happened before a couple of you joined the board, but those of you that have been on for a while, you know that we have a recruitment bonus program in the police, not in the fire department, but in the police department right now, it's $1,000. And it may not sound like a lot, but we've had that used. So we think that this $5,000 recruitment bonus is going to attract some attention.
The other thing I would suggest, if I was to make one concrete suggestion regarding the recruitment bonus, would be to open it up to any employee who would recruit a qualified police candidate. There are plenty of folks out there who might know police officers who are not currently police officers, who may be able to make a recommendation. And they, if things are as dire as we say, we should be recruiting from whoever we can find, however they come to us. So it may not be a bad idea, if someone on the treasurer's staff knows someone in their life who's a police officer for a community, come work for us. And that would be a good incentive to include as well.
Thank you for your advice. We'll take that under consideration.
Mr. DeShane?
Regarding the lateral recruitment, AKA poaching. I'm sure it's happening to us, and if we don't do it ourselves, we're going to end up on the short end of the stick. Have we any experience hiring retired police officers who left the department for 25 years? And what kind of officer would you anticipate they would make if we were to fill a 5-year or a 10-year gap?
Sure, I have not received any of those applications. Believe it or not. The majority of people, in my experience, the majority of officers who retire aren't looking to come to a high-energy department such as Meridian Township. And I'll give you an example, okay, from my personal life. My dad was a police officer for 43 years. He went from working in Grand Haven as a sergeant to being a bailiff at Muskegon County to working at New Era Police Department. And I don't know if you know where New Era is. It's in Oceana County, and it's a 4-person department. My dad was 65 years old, and he was the youngest officer in the department. So the chief was 82 years old. Generally speaking, that's obviously going to be a slow pace. My dad, had a seat at the coffee shop. That was where he had most of his patrol throughout the day. He's probably kicking me right now. But in all honesty, though, I would absolutely look at a retiree. However, I don't get those applications because really, this wouldn't be the type of agency that they'd be targeting to come to.
Okay, thank you.
The draw of having to go back to night shift and go through an extensive field training process just wouldn't appeal to somebody like that.
Okay.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. So you're going to put your emphasis on lateral transfers, we heard you say. And is our salary scale sufficient to bring lateral transfers in? I realize you're going to not bring them in at step 1 or step 3.
Sure. I guess, as I told Trustee Hendrickson, it's below average. However, we get a 3% bonus, or a 3% raise each year, and this $5,000. So, I mean, if you're making $75,000 plus you get a $5,000 bonus, I'm not a math whiz. Is that 7.5%? I'll ask you, Treasurer, I don't know.
It's closer to 10%, actually.
Okay, so I guess when you think of it that way, all right, you're getting this bonus. It's a one-time payment, right? But I hope that attracts people, I guess is what I'm saying. So to answer your question, ma'am, we are below average when it comes to our salary, but this kind of gives us a leg up. It kind of gives us that splash that you have this one-time payment coming at you, guaranteed for the next 3 years.
When you make these one-time payments, if a candidate does not make it all the way through their 1 year of service, you're not going to try and recover the monies that have been paid to that individual who recruited them in the first place. Is that accurate?
Well, let me tell you how we'll do it and then see if that answers your question, okay? So, like for instance, the police department, if we bring somebody in and they are recruited, the person we have a slip you sign as soon as what happens is, if I am going to recruit someone, I have to go and sign a slip with the chief that I'm actually bringing Jane Doe in to be an officer here. And that's the person, so on record as the recruiter. And you'd get $1,000 upon them being hired. And then the FTO, once they complete the FTO, they would get an additional $1,000. They don't get the bulk of the money until that person's successfully been here a year and is off probation. Then they get the other $3,000. So it takes a full year to get the full $5,000 for someone coming in.
I understand that, but if an individual recruits a police officer and they don't make it to that final stage of 1 year completed training, would you attempt to recover the original $1,000 when they brought the individual forward and perhaps the second $1,000 that got them through the academy?
No.
I would hope not. Okay, I just wanted that clarified. You also said that an individual making recommendations could get $10,000. Sounds to me like you're capping the amount. Is that accurate? That you could have an individual on staff, for instance, who hangs out with officers and could potentially recruit 3 people in a year? Is that possible? And would you pay them?
5, 10, 15, 20,000.
Okay.
Yeah, we're new officers.
I like the idea of expanding to all staff because I think the greater you can spread this information and make it attractive and not knowing what circles individuals travel in, I think it'd be wonderful to make it more expansive than what you're proposing right now, that it must be an officer that proposes. And my last question is regarding Chief Hamill's operation. It doesn't seem as dire as our police situation. So is this an equity issue to offer this $5,000 recruitment for both departments?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I got a really good example on that.
Okay.
So, I mean, the big picture here is numbers, for more so for police than fire. I'll give you an example. Lansing Fire Department just hired 26 people. 19 of them have no EMS. 19 of them have to go to EMT training and hopefully paramedic, but they don't enforce that. Huge cost.
Wow.
So it's a numbers game. These people will go for $1 more, they're going to leave. I just had 2 this year that left. One left for a reason, he lied to me. He went to another fire department, we already found out. Another guy left for another fire department. I don't know that they pay more, it was closer to home, but they don't hesitate today. So we have to look at retention. How do we retain these people? There's fire departments in the state of Michigan that are giving $10,000 bonuses and can't get people. Why, I don't know. So it's not always about the money, but that dollar wage keeps them here. These bonuses will help keep them there for 3 years. But really, they're looking at $1. They don't even care about the benefits to a degree. I mean, I always tell kids when I interview them, look at the end of the rainbow. What are you going into? What do you get when you leave here after 25 years? And they don't care. Okay. So how do we fix that? And that's the dilemma today, and everybody's dealing with it. And it's not just fire service. It's not just police. It's all over the place. So that's my 2 examples. I had 2 people leave, and they'll leave for a quarter more. They don't care.
I'd just like to comment, thank you for your honesty. It's really important. I was stunned by these statistics, and we absolutely have to get on this as quickly as we possibly can.
I will share a bit of good news.
Good.
If you look at our overall retention rate in the township, it is outstanding. It beats all the comps. It beats all of our neighbors. Our retention rate here in the township among our directors and among our staff is outstanding. We just are not having people leave. So there's probably a number of reasons for that, but I'm proud of that. So I thought I want to throw that out there tonight. We've got some work to do in a couple departments, and I really like the idea that was brought out about expanding it, something that we hadn't thought about, expanding that out to all, because we have 165 team members, and equity is a big issue. And in my position, it's sometimes facing darts from different groups from different reasons. And as I looked at doing this, I looked at equity, and I felt a little taken back about maybe some groups that were excluded in this. And so your idea tonight opens this up to everyone to have an opportunity. So everyone's involved, maybe not in the same manner as if you're a police officer or a firefighter paramedic, but it does offer everyone an opportunity to be involved. So I appreciate that idea from Trustee Hendrickson. There's more equity in the program if we do that.
Yeah.
Guthrie. Thank you, Madam Supervisor. How soon can this be implemented? How soon can you start? Like, if the board were all in agreement tonight, I made a motion for you to move forward, could you start implementing that, putting things in motion?
We can move on this as quickly as the board chooses to move.
And in regards to the contract, I know it expires in 2026.
Correct.
Can it be reopened if needed prior to that date?
Yes, and that's what we did last summer with the 2-tier system.
Okay, so you could take a look at it and say, we need to come back to the board possibly in one of your quarterly reviews. Okay.
Yes.
And then also in this process, Chief talked about equipment and other departments having better equipment. I'd like to or people saying that or whatever, but I'd like to make sure that is assessed as well, what our equipment situation is, and make sure, I mean, I'm assuming that we do that, but make sure that all of our equipment is being upgraded and up to snuff and.
Yeah, I'd like Chief to address that real quick, but before you do that, I would ask for a couple weeks. I appreciate you wanting to move this right along, but I need a little time to meet with the unions, because one of the issues is that we shouldn't, my opinion, allow this $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is to be added to final average comp, which then exacerbates our pension issue.
Absolutely.
So I need time to go back to the unions and work with them. I don't expect that to be difficult, but out of respect to them, I'd like to have a couple weeks to work that out with them. So, but Chief Grillo, about the question about equipment.
I think we've done an excellent job with upgrading our equipment and making sure our equipment meet the standards that officers should have. We're getting iPads coming up very soon. Every officer is going to be issued an iPad. Our vehicles are replaced every 4 years, is it, Bart? Every 4 years our vehicles are replaced. We replace our rifles. Officers just got brand new Class B uniforms. Everybody was issued 2 sets of those. So when it comes to our equipment, I think the young man who gave me that example was giving me an excuse, not necessarily something that was accurate to him. So I don't think that equipment's a problem for us, no, ma'am.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, you asked for at least 2 more weeks before we would expect implementation. When should we expect to see a proposed program that needs our approval? And what time, how long do you think that might take?
I'm hopeful to have it back before you on November 9th, if possible. I know that's the goal.
Okay.
If we can get it back on the 9th. But I will tell you, though, if we're not back on the 9th, if we're back at the second meeting in November, that's fine, too, because the bonuses aren't going to happen until July. And if somebody comes up, I will tell you right now, I will verbally tell both chiefs, if somebody comes forward right now and brings someone, we're going to implement the program. Because the boards, that we will initially kind of start the program, but I don't know that we'll have all the stuff with the unions worked out before the 9th, but certainly in the month of November, we will bring it back for final consideration from you. We will make the one change, and that is that the recruitment, $5,000 recruitment part of it is open to all township employees.
Board members? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We'll look forward to the formal proposal.
Thank you, and I really want to thank our administration all the way around. This is really comprehensive, it's really important, and it affects all of our communities. And if I might be excused, I'm going to be traveling this evening up to the MML, so I appreciate you putting this forward, Madam Supervisor, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'll echo that as well, what he said, and also thank you to Manager Walsh for being so open to this discussion. Right from the beginning, he took this extraordinarily seriously and took everything that we had to say under advisement. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And I would add, I'm very appreciative of your revealing the kinds of statistics that you brought to help us make the decision we need to make.
Absolutely.
I would ask Chief Hamill if he has anything to add to this conversation. I don't. Okay, then we'll move on to 13B. Chief Hamill is prepared to come and talk to us about Fire Protection Emergency Services Cost Recovery Ordinance Update.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Supervisor and Board. Probably about 6 or 8 months ago.
I'm sorry. I did I did it again.
Stephen was all ready.
Stephen was ready?
You're fine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's
Go ahead.
go in order.
No, sir.
Yeah, go in order.
Okay, let's go in order.
Sorry about that. Anyway, about 6 or 8 months ago, we were looking at some services we've been performing based on other agencies that are basically not fulfilling some of their agreements with like assisted living centers and things like that. So I call we were being dumped on. And so we were looking at ways to make sure if we build based on our current cost recovery at that time, what could we do? What can we do legally? Can I bill a patient as well as an entity? And the answer is no. And so what came out of that is from working with Fahey and Lizzie and Jacob is our cost recovery ordinance was a little weak. And I'll give you an example in a minute. With that is we do annually a fee schedule for our EMS, and that's put in the budget. Well, legally, it had no teeth. So if some insurance company wanted to come and say, I'm not paying you, we had no teeth. So that's what prompted this. And so working with them, like I said, it's been about 8 months. This is the final product that they came up with. And it really opens up us to continue to look at other avenues that people aren't doing their job and we're forced to do because we get called for everything, literally. One of the things that we added to our fee schedule this year was lift assists. We do about 600 a year. Now, we're not going after our residents for that, but about 140 of those a year are at medical facilities that have staff that can do it. And I can tell you some of those staff have been told, call the fire department. Well, my guys got backs just like yours, and we don't work for you. So we're going to bill them now for everyone they call us. That's built into our new fee schedule, which this cost recovery ordinance will help coming in January with the new budget. So really, that's the backbone behind this, is we wanted to give ourselves the ability to protect ourselves. And we found out, working with the treasurer, we were going to take an entity to small claims, but because our cost recovery ordinance didn't have enough teeth, we couldn't do it. And we were getting ready to file. And that came by the direction of our attorneys, don't do it. So there's some things in here that look kind of odd. So for example, it talks about fires and billing. We're not billing our residents for fires. A traditional, what we call bread and butter fire. Now, if someone has a meth lab in their basement, we're billing them, because I can tell you that's a huge cleanup. There's state and federal guidelines behind it. It's like a hazardous materials. We have to be able to bill for that. So that's really, it just gives us the ability to do that. So it's not all inclusive because we can't just name everything. It gives us the ability to do those odd things that may come up. So that's really the kind of meat and potatoes behind this and why we're doing it, and why we've changed it from what it was to what it is. And there's not a lot of changes, just a few.
Do you have an idea of when the last time this ordinance was updated?
Well, it was before I was here, and I've been here 5.5, so I really don't know.
Okay. Board members, you have questions, comments? Mr. DeShane?
Any estimate, Chief, of how much we might be able to recover with this ordinance?
Well, let's say if we had 140 lift assists at $500, whatever that adds up to be, that's the first part. I know the entity we were going to bill, we were going to take them to small claims for $3,600, and that's probably only about, I bet we probably could have billed them another 15 or 20 calls. So it's unknown, and a lot of it's not necessarily to bring in a lot more money. It's really to protect us from these places not doing their jobs. That's really, it's really a deterrent.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Wilson?
I need to understand this better, because the way it reads, it indicates that if, for instance, someone has a down power line, are you going to bill that individual homeowner for the down power line? And how do you distinguish? If you're not, how do we distinguish between billing that homeowner for the line that went down because the tornado came through versus whatever you're thinking you're going to bill for?
So we already bill for the power lines and gas leaks. It's directly to consumers. We have an agreement with them.
Okay.
It's a requirement that they have to fulfill. So we get, after the first hour, I think it's $125 an hour, and then if there's more than one vehicle there, it goes to $250.
So you're
I can
not
tell you
billing
last year alone, it was $12,000.
You're not billing the individual, you're billing the institution.
Yep, and they turn us down on a few bills that we've sent them, but last year it was $12,000.
So what do you do in the case of an individual is threatening to harm themselves or others?
Well, and that was on the direction of the attorneys. I can't really give you an example, because if we transport them, we're going to bill them by the EMS call. So, maybe there was, I don't even know an example. And again, this is not all inclusive. They pulled this from a lot of other ordinances that other entities have across the state. Lansing, they looked at East Lansing's, and they looked at a number of others that they actually had sent me. So I guess I can't even really give you a good example that if they had a meth lab, I really don't. I don't have a good example. So we're going to charge them for the transfer in the ambulance, but I can't see really other reasons we would charge.
But if you didn't transport them, maybe it was.
We wouldn't bill them.
So how?
Unless there was some huge cost to it. I don't. That's why they did it this way, because they wanted to leave it open-ended in case we had some huge cost. For example, if I had a house fire today, I'll give you an example I had a number of years ago in Lansing, where we had some MSU students that were extracting hemp oil. Well, hemp oil, when you extract it, the butane is lighter than air, so it goes down the stairs, and when the furnace kicks on, it lit the house up, turned it, dropped it, and burned the three gentlemen. They lived. But we had to have that house torn down the next day. Well, that's probably today a $15,000, $20,000 endeavor. We're not paying for that. So we have to be able to do cost recovery on that as well, which we can do tax rolls on that if we had to as, a resident. But those are examples of real life things that happen. So we can't give you every example here. It just gives us the ability for the right reason. And I would come to Manager Walsh before I just send a bill to someone, because we're not just going to bill our residents to bill. I will tell you there's two fire departments in the state of Michigan that are billing their residents $800 for lift assists. It's, according to our billing agency, it's not billable. I can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. It's our job. That's what we're here for. But people are doing that across the state. I think as a deterrent more than anything, but they're also looking at revenue. I'm not necessarily looking at revenue. I'm looking at protecting us, the township, and the ability to maintain a fire department that can respond and not get called to some other crazy call because an agency can't do their job when I have a real emergency over here. And that's happening every day.
So based on this non-exhaustive list of fire protection services, in what of these instances would you bill a resident?
Meth lab, some type of hazardous materials within the home, some type of cleanup like that.
Okay.
Anything that maybe we got tagged with a bill somehow, which I don't know how that would work, but so the only thing a resident can do when we bill them for an EMS call is they come and they can ask for leniency if they have a true emergency or something, they can't pay a bill. And this builds in where they can come and protest that they don't want to pay the bill, but I can't really give you a lot of examples. You just don't know what's going to happen today.
The one I found particularly challenging was the request for excess requests for ambulance service or emergency services. If you have someone who's really ill and coming to end of life, I can imagine there might be an opportunity where they're going to need more than 5 visits in a 30-day period. So is this a hard and fast rule?
So this is not necessarily meant for EMS. This is meant kind of for fire alarms. There's buildings we go to multiple times, and then fire marshal will go make a visit.
Yeah.
And if they don't fix it, we're going to start billing them each time.
Okay.
Which is already was on this, but it was really not well written. We have some of the hotels we're running to weekly.
Right.
Well, there's a means to an end. Fix your alarm system, and we can force that upon them. Our fire marshal can kind of cite them, and we don't. Some of them are kids pulling fire alarms. Well, we're not going to bill you for that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'd be billing some of these hotels every week, because really they have kids pulling their alarms weekly. You wouldn't believe it. So again, we're not out there to gouge anybody. Honestly, it's more of a deterrent, but it also gives us the ability, if something strange comes up, we can bill.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I just don't want to see our residents billed for services they would expect.
For sure.
Based on their taxes, paying their taxes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I appreciate the discussion on this topic, because I'll be honest, I read this and the text alone in a vacuum of this ordinance had me very concerned that we were going to be getting people banging on everyone's door saying, this is what my tax dollars are for.
Exactly.
So I appreciate.
And they would be calling you.
Right, yeah. They'd be calling all of us, I'm pretty sure. I wish there was some way to build some kind of clarity into the ordinance itself so that we were careful about it. I did think of one example, which I think a couple of years ago, we had someone who had a rifle on top of the Chili's out here. I suspect that might be something that would fall under that threaten to harm oneself or others, if the fire department also responded to that.
And I think that's a great example when you have a situation like that. I think police and us could bill for that type of crime that draws our resources in for 2, 3, 4 hours.
Right. Can you talk to me about letter A here, responding to a multi or single motor vehicle or pedestrian accident?
Yeah, so again, if it's a hazardous materials cleanup, so gas on a street, a tremendous amount. There's times where, let's say it's a diesel, a over-the-road tractor with 2 50-gallon tanks on each side that leak. We're going to have to call someone in and clean that up. And so we're going to bill for our service in regards to, we're going to have a lot of extra staff. We're going to call in our Metro Hazmat team, and we're going to do cost recovery on that. And they're all going to want, what we have built in that is a cost of our vehicles per hour. And then what our partners will do, we'll bill for their staff, any overtime costs and equipment.
Okay.
And so that's kind of that, again, it's kind of
We're going well beyond the run-of-the-mill fender benders,
right.
Glass on the road from a tail light or whatever.
Correct. So for example, we'll transport them, we're going to bill them for that.
Sure.
But we're not going to bill them for the service. There are fire departments that do.
Sure.
And you bill their insurance company for the vehicle, not their insurance company for healthcare.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double thing there.
So yeah, I appreciate everything else that came with this in terms of the collection mechanisms and what have you. I think, I know it's been a much longer process for you and the lawyers to come up with this than it is for us to review this right now. Before it comes back for action, I would love to pick their brains and see, is there any way to provide some additional clarity that this is for, for circumstances that are atypical for the fire department.
Okay. And you're looking at A and
B specifically.
Got it. Okay.
But I mean, C and D are also true. I mean, those are standard services that the fire department provides every day. And thank goodness we're not responding to bomb threats or power lines every day, but the sort of thing that is your bread and butter, as you say.
Okay, absolutely. I will talk to them about that, see if we can clarify that a little, and if we need them to come at some point, they're more than happy to come.
Sure.
So
thank you.
Great.
No further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Expect to have you bring this back to us for.
Yeah, let me work on that and figure out a timeline.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Gibbons.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for your attention this evening. I will try to be relatively quick because, let's see, we've popped out of this. In 2022, we had Brightline in here to review a number of essential improvements for our network. And the good news is, as you take a look at the high priority projects on the left side of the graph right here, much too small to read, you will be happy to hear that most of those projects have been completely completed and now essentially nothing left to do on any of those. Some of the projects on the right, in particular our workstation replacement, were a little bit far behind, and our individual server and file level backup stuff we're reviewing at this time in conjunction with improvements that we made along the way. Based on the original plan and then the implementation as it was completed throughout 2022 and 2023, some of the infrastructure inside our network changed and required some moderate redesign, especially for the backup systems that we're using in our network. Last year, we completed the installation of firewalls at this facility, and shortly thereafter, we completed installation of firewalls at all of our main facilities. These are centralized in terms of management. That means that when we push out a policy, it can be immediately disseminated to all of our major sites throughout the township. If we need to segment our network to fix a problem that's occurred or a virus, we have much better capability to segment each individual network on our network. That's phones from computers, computers from video, applications from just about anything, any granular item that we can focus on, we can segment and take a look at. We have internet capabilities at every single site that is at least a gigabit in connection for all of our sites with the exception of Harris Nature Center. We're working on that site with AT&T currently. But all of those connections at our 3 fire stations, service center, public safety building, police department, and township hall all work together in unison to use all of those internet connections to route the traffic most efficiently for our end users. Some significant enhancements in terms of how everything's routing throughout our network. With the implementation of those firewall devices at each of the sites, we've also now completed something called SD-WAN, which stands for Software Defined Wide Area Network Routing. And what that means is that it doesn't matter if one connection goes down at a facility or if one connection is being overloaded. The entire network reacts together to utilize all the resources to route around outages and increased available bandwidth where required to do something that's not currently running very well. We've got fiber between our 3 main sites that is leveraged 24 hours a day and is the primary mode of communication between our buildings. But in the event that that's not enough traffic, we've got other leased circuits from AT&T, broadband connections from companies like Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile. All of these work together to route our traffic through the most efficient paths possible across our network. We've replaced all of our network infrastructure at all of our facilities. It can all be managed via a web portal that's extremely secure and locked down to our facilities here. This type of enhancement really puts us in a great position for some of the new things that we want to do, like with a bank where we talk about we want to make sure that people can only log into our portal from here. We have now the capability to tie that down to the port, to the switch, to the building, whatever we need to do to enhance our security at any of our individual sites. We've added Wi-Fi hotspots throughout most of our facilities and are continuing to add hotspots at different locations. Even today, we're working with the Parks Department for Marketplace on the Green and some enhancements over there. We've implemented network monitoring systems that give us insight to each of these devices. We can look at everything on a port basis. We get active monitoring 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If there's a problem on an individual port, a switch, a site, we're getting constant feedback that was just not available to us before these enhancements were completed. We've replaced the backend infrastructure for all of our disk storage about 10 times faster than our old storage area network device. This has been a tremendous boon for a lot of the performance issues that we were seeing probably 2 or 3 years ago. Disaster recovery as a service, what that basically means is every second of every day, any changes on our network are being pushed off to a service provider who can then, in turn, if something happens at our site here, stand up any of our servers that are protected by that service. A level of protection we never had before about a year ago now. We've still got a few things that we're working on. Our Office 365 hardening is still underway. Mostly completed. We've got the to-do list that we're knocking out. Workstation replacements are ongoing. And like I said, we're working on that backup system. In particular, we're looking at the way that we used to back up our cloud-based resources. Our Office 365 mailboxes were not with the new upgrades that we've put on the system. The Office 365 backup method we were using before is not adequate anymore. So we'll be making some changes to that particular system over the next 2 to 3 months. But for the most part, We spent about, we have not completed spending the $970,000, but we're very close, and everything is more or less on track to be completed before the end of the year. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah. Any questions?
Anyone?
That means I didn't do a good job of it.
No, you did a great job. Trustee
Wilson.
Trustee Wilson.
Is your disaster recovery service outside of the region?
So it's actually multi-homed. So there's 4 different locations in the United States, and there's some in the European Union as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Hendrickson.
As I alluded to earlier, I was involved in a number of IT projects from the consultant side. And the idea that a project could be done on time and on budget was a laughable notion.
I think we're doing okay. Especially, we had a couple of, we've had obviously some challenges with the clerk and the election stuff, and some fun projects thrown in the mix of that, and the relocation down to the 242 facility, and then around the township, we've had a lot of interruptions. We're not exactly on schedule. I would say we're a little bit behind where we wanted to be, but we feel very well with what's going on right now.
And I was only meaning to say that a little bit behind is way ahead. So congratulations, thank you. Job well done.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments? We'll move on to item 13C, recreational marijuana licensing standards. Mr. Schmidt, I believe.
Oh, I have backup tonight.
We always like to see him.
Township Attorney Kushel and Stocker are here this evening. So this is phase 2 of the move towards recreational marijuana. And so this is, as we previously discussed, the next step after we adopted the ordinance would be to establish criteria for reviewing the applications. And so what you have in front, and so just to be clear, this is not an ordinance amendment. This is a policy. This is a document that the board is establishing to review these. And so you have sort of our multi-level draft of that. And what we've gotten to is essentially 2 questions that we need feedback on this evening. And I'll go over those briefly, and I'll just briefly touch on the criteria. So question A is how you want to compare the applications, whether you want to assign points or whether you would take the approach that we're currently recommending, which is to assess these similar to a special use permit. And so the reason we've gone down this route is that, one, it avoids potential for like ties, or if someone is like 2 points behind and we get litigation, or they start to lobby us or things like that. This is much more, because this is a land use decision, we're treating this closer to a land use set of criteria. And so if you go through the special use permit criteria and the criteria that we've established here, there is some congruity between the two. It's not direct, but there is some passing back and forth of ideas between the 2 sets of standards. And so this is something we know. We know a special use permit. We know how we review those. And so we can establish good findings of fact when we get to that point. And so that's really question 1, is hard points based or special use permit style. The second question is, how do you want to actually review these? And it really comes down to whether or not you want to establish sort of an advisory committee, or whether the board wants to review them all entirely themselves. And that I will leave that piece more to the township attorney in just a second. So from the criteria perspective, what we're trying to do here is, again, treating this like a special use permit of, is it in the right place for the community? Are they proposing quality plans that are not going to have major negative externalities? Do they have competency in this business? Do they have previous operations within the community? Do they have the financial resources? In sort of a more broad, like, what is their outreach? What does it look like? How are they going to be a part of the community? And so we've got these 11 or 10 criteria and a bunch of sub-criteria, but that's the rough picture that we're looking at here, as opposed to saying you get 5 points for filling out your application correctly, and 5 points for signing it correctly, and 5 points for having $10 million in the bank, or 10 points if you have $20 million. Trying to get away from those hard and fast things, because what we found is it's easy to check a box. And so you end up with a lot of people that are kind of bunched closely together. And how do you differentiate between them at that point? Well, what you do is you start talking about things like these criteria that would be more of a special use permit. And so that's why we're proposing that at this time. We could easily, if the board would prefer, take this back, rework this, and establish numbers to go to that. But I'll turn it over to Attorney Kushel to discuss this matter further.
So definitely second everything that Director Schmidt advised. I would think it provides a lot of flexibility. It would require more detailed findings and sort of statements and articulations of why this applicant over the other applicant. Does come with its own risks about, then they're going to nitpick the words that are used or something like that. So it's not without its own risks, but does seem in fact kind of easier than assigning a point value, because it basically forces you to go through that reasoning and then put it out on the record. We like the criteria that we've put together as a draft for you. We think it covers a lot of what we've heard from the board and then seen in other communities, et cetera. But of course, if there's other things you want to see, we can put those in. If there's things you want to take out, we can take things out. So it is a draft system. Then the other piece that's sort of up for discussion is how to implement it. And that's, will the board take a very active role in reviewing all the applications and being right there up front in the nitty gritty? Some communities have opted to do that. It's an important decision. So the boards want to be forward and very active. Other communities, and we see this a lot in larger communities, is where they assign a committee to do a lot of the initial work and provide that thorough vetting to sort of separate, the strong applicants and give some direction to the board and a recommendation of, hey, we think these are the best applicants, but then it still is on the board to make the final decision. So it's definitely still the board's decision, and we would absolutely draft any procedures and standards to ensure and solidify that process. On that point, what you have in the packet tonight are just the review criteria, because that's really the heart of the procedures and standards, is how are we going to judge the application. And then the next piece is the process piece that we would then build out around that in a procedures and standards document. So there will be kind of more wordsmithing coming at you in the future. We've tried to focus in on these criteria standards at this point. The other piece is if you were to utilize a committee, then who sits on the committee? And then also, how does that committee then do its own work? We're confident if that's the direction of the board with some guidance, we can put together, again, a good initial plan like we've done with the proposed criteria here to give you something to chew on, and then maybe we tinker with it around the edges to make sure it fits your vision. There's been good case law. We're aided in the fact that several cases have now come to conclusion. Yeah, I know I've stood before you a lot of times and said, we don't know, that's currently being litigated. Some of that litigation has now solidified in published opinions from the Court of Appeals, so that's very helpful. There does still remain potential Supreme Court review, but we feel confident that we'd be able to draft a set of standards and a procedure for a committee process that would be consistent with the Open Meetings Act and the decisions rendered by the Court of Appeals, as well as both your obligation to your citizens for transparency, as well as our ordinance standard, which does require a public hearing. So we have that in our ordinance that there will be a public hearing. Now, we can put that at different places, right? At the committee, at the township board, at both, plenty of options to implement that. And we think we have good guidance from the Court of Appeals to put together a strong package for you. Of course, if the township board wants to remain front forward, very active, then we're all going to be in open meetings, because you're an open meeting is basically not going to be an issue to satisfy those, because you're very adept at it.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor, and thank you to Director Schmidt and Attorney Kushel for bringing this back before us in such a timely fashion. We have, it seems like, two things to weigh in on. So unlike many other circumstances, I'm going to do my best to be brief. I believe, in my opinion, that we should stick with the non-points option, the SUP style review of the various applications that come before us. And I also further believe that we should have an advisory committee be put together to assess these and provide a recommendation to the board for their consideration. And if I may go so far as to suggest that it include the supervisor, 2 other board members, the planning director, the economic development director, the police chief, and then someone from township management. I think a 7-member panel, an odd number would be sufficient. I think that includes a number of the stakeholders that would need to be involved, that would have good input on these decisions. And maybe I'm missing something or have left someone out that I shouldn't have, but I think that would be a wise group of people to put forward on a committee. And so those would be my 2 suggestions. A committee of 7 with the people I mentioned and a qualitative review of the applications.
Can I ask a question first? So once the applications come in, is there already in the procedure a review by the planning staff?
I mean, we'll do a perfunctory review like we do with any application that comes in to ensure that it's a complete application.
Right. Okay.
So we'll at least take it past that point. That's what we do with everything that comes to the front desk.
Okay. Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Thank you for getting rid of the scoring system. I don't like the scoring system at all. It's complicated, it's too much work, it's convoluted, and like you said, it's gonna bunch too many people together. I like the SUP process. It's much smoother, it's easier to understand, it follows other process, everything you said. I don't like the committee idea. I think it could tend to lead to biases, but that's my opinion. I would trust staff to review the applicants and bring those to the board and have the board look at them, or some other type of process. But I'm not a big fan of pulling a police chief who's already stretched thin, management who's already stretched thin, economic development director and board members and the supervisor onto yet another committee. It seems like we have a ton of committees. Maybe if we can reduce some other committees, maybe we don't need all the committees that we have, but it seems like there's a ton of committees. And I'm just not a big fan of reviewing all of the applications in a committee.
Trustee, who?
Goes up first.
Thank you.
It's hard, you're trying to look both ways, I know.
And I'm trying to be fair.
I'll do my best to be brief as well. In terms of choosing the SUP style versus the point style, I like it as well, although I'm not quite sure I understand completely how we define the SUP style. The problem with the points system is how we assign these points is a huge value judgment all by itself.
Yes.
And so we've already biased it one way or another just by the point systems. So with the qualitative SUP style, we would simply see if they meet, generally speaking, each of these 10 or 11 or 12 criteria. And then from there, if they do, they would make it to the next level and then review it more qualitatively, break the application down. Is that correct?
No, it would be more of the second process from the very beginning. You wouldn't so much have that first winnowing phase. You'd, for example, take security measures. So that's one of our proposed criteria. Someone could fail to put security measures in their application. Well, that's obviously going to hurt them a lot, right? Then someone else could have state minimum security requirements and ordinance minimum security requirements. Then someone else could come in with a great security plan showing 360-degree coverage, inside, outside, whatever have you, great video capture, discussion, all that. So that's going to be a highly rated application. So then something that would come out of the comments would be, excellent security, exceeds standards, very thorough and well thought out. And then, another review for your middle candidate might be, sufficient security, meets state minimums, but not extraordinary in any respect. And then the other candidate would be, basically failed to satisfy requirements. So then when it comes to deciding between the applications, you'd have these different statements among the various applications about what their application did for the application review standards. Okay. And then you'd basically be able to go through and summarize and be like, well, applicants 1 and 2, they both were exceptional in several different areas. For me personally, I think security is a paramount thing. Applicant 2 had the best security, and that's why I support giving them a permit in area, whatever. So you'd have those discussions of how the applicants are ranked and scored from a qualitative perspective.
Okay, finishing that. I actually like Trustee Hendrickson's idea of a committee. To your point, Clerk, I don't think we have to have it as maybe that expansive. We could have a smaller committee with planning staff and board members, and we could keep it so it's not 7 or 9, but more like 4, 3, 4, 5. So the smaller the committee, the more effective it's going to be in reviewing this. But I think it would save us untold hours here at the board table reviewing these individually, because they're all going to be, they're all going to take some time to review them properly. The question then becomes the composition of that committee. I agree the supervisor should be part of that committee, but then the question is, do we want to have Courtney and I in there because we've both kind of been on different ends of this discussion, or do we want to have more moderate members of the board who've been back and forth? That's, I think, something we need to discuss as a board at a future point. But I do like the idea of 3 members of the board reviewing these with staff and then bringing back recommendations for the whole board. The whole board is still have to act, but it would save this board a lot of time late into the night, what it would be, and it may speed up the process considerably as well. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I concur with the attorney's recommendation to have a more qualitative versus quantitative review. So I would be definitely in favor of what you're recommending. So that leaves us with the discussion of who's going to do the review. And this is a tough one, because there's so many personal opinions about this. I do think we would benefit if you do indeed have 3 board members, including the supervisor. I think we would benefit from some professional expertise. So again, maybe it's 2 board members and a staff member. Maybe it's that small. So I do agree. I think it needs to be small and effective, but I also think we should consider personal agendas that may have arisen during this process and look for people that are more neutral.
Trustee Wierenski.
Thank you, Supervisor. I would 100% concur with the land use approach as opposed to a scoring with points for all the reasons I just said. I also would prefer a committee. I'm not set necessarily on a number, but I do feel it needs to be comprised of professionals as well as board members. I think it should be neutral. However, I do think about, I know our police chief clearly with his presentation is very busy, but it will affect our policing significantly. So I think that perspective would be very helpful. Of course, we want Director Schmidt. So I also think it needs to be an odd number, however that's comprised. So I would echo, I think, everybody but the clerk on this one. I would just look a little bit further into the criteria, is to maybe consider that that we have a criteria of the previous applicants that have already paid their MMRA annual fees to Meridian Township. I don't know if that's points or however we do that and for the number of years. I just think it shows commitment and I think it shows perseverance. They lived through a COVID crisis in a township that was very important, but very thoughtful in this process, what took out time.
Isn't that in there in 8?
So what we've done under sub 8 is
Thank you.
we've set it up so that if they're open and operating, it is clearly the sort of high point, rather than going through if they got through the original process, because if you remember, the original process was just a lottery. It was ping pong balls, and all but one of them expired, technically, originally, based on them not sticking through it, candidly. So I think what we were pushing towards was if you could open, and I suspect one of them is going to open in the next month, that we would more heavily weigh towards open and operating than just having gotten through ping pong balls.
There is also the 5th criteria, which is dedication to Meridian Township, and it covers a lot of different aspects. It doesn't pull out a previous medical marijuana application as part of that specifically, but what's listed there is including but not limited to, and we do mention the members or shareholders having a history of business operations within the township or compliance with regulations, et cetera. So that's certainly an opportunity for a committee member or a board member to say, hey, they got through that application process before. It's the same, it's a marijuana situation. I give them some points for that. I think that's, elevates the application in a different way.
That's helpful. I worry about the operating, given that we lived through a COVID time. It was very difficult for any business to make it during that time and to open a brand new business and a brand new opportunity. So that's why I'm reluctant to, I think it's important, 100%, but I would not want to necessarily leave out the other folks that have been consistent over the last 3 years or 4 years since we started this. Just a suggestion.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I'm opposed to board members being on the committee. I don't like the idea of elected officials being on the committee for something like this when we're continually being contacted by the marijuana industry, and I think it could look bad and could sway decisions. I also, given the dire need for police officers and our desire as a board to have the manager and the police chief fix this problem that we have, I do not wish to take him away from that situation, from trying to get the protection we need in this community to serve on a committee. I don't think that would serve us well to take his time away from what we've asked him to do earlier tonight. I think staff is perfectly capable and professional and have the qualifications to review applications without elected board members on the committee. And so I ask the both of you, maybe I should have asked this before I gave my opinion, what is the process that other communities use typically? Do they have a subcommittee of elected board members? Do they have all the applications going in front of the board, or is it a mixture depending on what the community wants?
Yes. I mean, we're not recreating the wheel. I mean, we've seen this. We've seen both ways. Frankly, I could probably pick up a couple of other sort of oddball ways that it's been done in communities too, if I look hard enough. I would not say, and feel free to speak your opinion as well, but I would not say that there's a standard way of doing this.
Yeah, I would agree. Whether or not board members are involved in the committee is a community by community decision. Some communities do not. And then that recommendation is developed and brought to the board kind of for the first time, shall we say, with no board members on the committee. In other cases, they're more involved. In comments to the police chief and the demands on that time, one thing that I have seen in the past is have just a review of the relevant portion. So for example, we could have the security piece sent over to someone in the police department who's going to know more about, security capture, security camera definition, what they would like to see, if they have to investigate, say something happens in the parking lot, right? So if they have to investigate something, what would be valuable for them to have? And then they're only reviewing one discrete portion of each application, but you're getting that feedback where it's most highly valued. So that's certainly something that can be structured into how the application review proceeds forward.
Our liquor license applications are much like that as well.
Yeah, I compare it actually to a liquor license application. When Director Clark sends those out, we each have our lanes that we're sort of looking at. We, from a planning perspective, we get a plan and it gets routed to 5 different groups internally. It doesn't always go to PD. But if we need PD, we know where to find them. And so I think we could certainly if the board does not want to specifically put them on the committee, I'm sure we could very easily make it work and still get their input.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Just to address the clerk's concerns, we are, as an elected group of individuals, the ones who are held most responsible and most accountable to the residents of this community. I don't see it as a negative thing to be involved in this. I think it's an obligation. I know that, yes, have I heard from members who are likely going to be submitting applications? Absolutely. I've also heard from residents who are vehemently opposed to recreational marijuana coming to this. We have to, as individuals and as a group, weigh those those two arguments, and we will stand in front of the voters next year and answer to them ultimately. And regardless of whether or not we choose to have a committee of board members sit down and do this and provide a recommendation, that recommendation comes back to the full board anyway. And so all of us will eventually be held accountable for it at the end of the process, no matter which way we choose. And if we choose, as my understanding is, even if the staff, if the other option is that the staff, comes together on a committee outside of the board and brings it back to us, the board could just as easily say, we don't agree with whatever the staff has presented. We believe that, applicant C should be, given the permit instead of applicant B, and we'll provide reasons for it. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is an area where we should be shying away from our responsibility to be involved in this process at every step. That's my thought. That it's entirely possible that you're right, and we should try to avoid that. But my opinion is that, at the end of the day, the voters sent us here to do this. And at the end of the day, the voters should be able to point to us and say, they're the ones who are involved in this, and if I don't agree with them, then we'll find someone else to go and sit in their place.
Mr. DeShane.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I concur with Trustee Hendrickson on this one as well. Even by appointing a committee, we're giving up some of that discernment and decision-making. And so we're taking a shortcut there to take it further and say to the staff, planning staff, that we have the ultimate trust in, who we ask for opinions, and which is brand new for this board, to ask for you to weigh in on some of these planning issues. To ask you to come back and bring back the preferred list is abdicating our responsibility. We need to get down at the application level, at least the subcommittee of this board, to make these decisions. They're hard decisions. It'd be much easier to turn it over to staff. But as Trustee Hendrickson pointed out, that's not what we were elected for, to turn this over to staff. We were elected to make these hard decisions ourselves. And bring in our ideas, our opinions, and what we're hearing from the voters, weigh all that in and look at these applications and say, I think this one is the best for the community for these reasons. That's really why we're here, to make these difficult decisions. This will be a difficult decision for us. And we've, in some ways, been building up to it for a couple of years now. And you actually go back to the first recreational marijuana ordinance back in 2019, yeah? We first passed this. So it's now a 4-year-long process to support us that. At the end here, and quite honestly, we know recreational marijuana stores is the end goal for these applicants and for what they want. So we're at the end of this process, which has been 4 years in the making. To turn it over to staff, I think sends the wrong message to the voters. It says this board doesn't want to get involved, and we do need to be involved. It's too important not to be involved.
But I'm sorry, but my understanding is it's always going to be our decision.
Thank you.
It's always going to come back to us to make the decision.
It is, but they're going to bring back the refined list, the preferred list. And if the board acts as it has in the past, we don't take apart ordinances they bring to us generally, say, no, insert this clause, move this clause. We trust their judgment. So we're very likely to do the same on this list they bring back to us. So what we get brought to the board, the full board to approve, in this case, we need to be much more involved in the actual report that comes to the board.
Clerk Gruthers.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. First off, we're not elected to sit here and select applications. That's not why we were elected. Secondly, I fully 100% trust staff that they know how to vet and look through applications that go through an SUP process and match the ordinance and can bring those applications to us. And I don't like the insinuation or any kind of idea or mention that we don't trust staff or that it has to be on the board and the board has to do this. I feel as if those are the statements being made and that the voters voted us in here to do this. And I didn't have one voter. I called 10,000 people during my campaign. Not one person asked me to vet applications for marijuana businesses that were coming to the township. Not one person asked me about marijuana. The number one question I got was about equity. And so when we talk about equity and we talk about applications that are coming before the township, we're not sitting on a committee, a bunch of board members looking at applications in other industries, but for some reason we're doing it with marijuana. And you know what my opinion is and my stance is, but I just completely 100% disagree. I have 100% faith in staff. I know I'm the only person who disagrees on this, but I think these applications should be treated like all the other applications and that we can 100% trust staff. They do come to the board. We do have the final decision. Like other things that come before the township board. And I don't think we should treat the marijuana industry in any differently. And that'll be I won't raise my hand again. That'll be my final say on the matter. And thank you for giving me the time.
Let's hear from Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. I did not hear that there was no trust in staff. And I just want to put some history and some perspective. The last 4 years in working through the medical marijuana, it was exceptionally tumultuous. We had hours and hours and hours and hours of meetings. And it is because the residents kept continuing to bring concerns and working through those concerns and working through the steps, safety being one of them. That is the number one concern, and then smell. Clerk, no disrespect. I think that is what the treasurer, and I don't want to speak for you, Phil, but I think that's what we're looking at, is that having board members included in the entire process is really important in this particular situation. We also do it for SUPs and for other land use situations where other communities don't do that. We allow the staff to do it, but we've taken control over certain land use. So I just want to say, I didn't hear that we don't trust staff. I certainly don't feel that we don't trust staff. I just feel that the board needs to be a part of the process as it has been for the last 4 years. That's my last comment.
Did you still have?
Trustee Wazinski clarified exactly what I meant. No disrespect to staff, just the board needs to be involved in this very important decision at the ground level.
So that looks like 4 who, well, so as to question number 1, what I'm hearing is that we approve of the type of review criteria and the type of process. Question number 2, I'm not sure what I'm hearing in terms of a conclusion. So maybe for our next look at this, we did come to a conclusion about a smaller group of engaged reviewers as opposed to a larger one. So let's start in our next step with that.
So what we can do is we can have the entire policies and procedures put together now that we've settled on sort of the SUP approach. And we know generally that we want a committee, we just don't know the makeup of the committee. And so what we can do is we can put it all together, and then in the cover memo, staff can outline essentially what will be 2 options for the board to discuss. The option A will be committee with 3 board members. Option B will
With board members.
With board members, yes, thank you. And option B will be without board members. And so that's what we can do for the next meeting. Apologies. Next time you have this back, it will not be the next meeting, as my sister has asked me to officiate her wedding, and that's I will not be here. So we will have this back on the 21st of November, most likely, for some decision-making process. Still well within sort of the schedule I threw out there, and we're real close to what I had always thought. So, and that'll give, then we can move on from this step. We'll have the policies and procedures in place, publish those, give the industry a chance to take a look at it, and then the board can discuss when they'd like to open an application window.
All right. Sounds good.
Is there anything else you need? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
I see nodding heads.
Thank you, board.
And item 13D, MDHDA's, XMSHDA's, isn't it? Community Development Block Grant, CDBG Housing Improving Local Livability Program called CHILL. Is that, shouldn't that be MSHDA?
Michigan State, yes, it should. I apologize. This was the last ad. You don't even have a memo in your packet this evening because.
That's right.
This is a late ad, and I did not have time to put anything together. But briefly, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up of. I apologize. I'd like to give the board a heads up as to where we're at with this. Director Massey and myself submitted a letter of interest to MISTA, Michigan State Housing Development Authority, on pretty short notice, which is why the board hasn't talked about this previously. By way of background, the MDC had $20 million of CDBG funding that was transferred to MISTA. MISTA now needs to get that out the door. And so typically, CDBG funding is limited to a specific list of communities within the state of Michigan.
And don't include us.
That meet low to moderate income standards, does not include us. Because my understanding of this is because this is a subgrant of a subgrant, the state can then distribute it more widely. And that's what MISTA is trying to do here. They're trying to distribute this much more widely throughout the state. And I apologize, some of my notes are over there. I might need to grab them. But Director Massey and I submitted a letter of intent, which was the first step of the process, to apply for $480,000 of CDBG CHILL monies. The maximum amount of funding you could apply for is $500,000. There's $20 million in the pot. They'll take a couple million most likely for administrative. So ultimately, it was a numbers game of how many communities apply. Thank you very much. And so ultimately, they were going to max out at 15 applicants based on the numbers. They got 16, so very good chance that we get funding here. There's two paths for this funding. One is, and I'm going to simplify this, homeownership rehab. So homeowner lives there, can't afford to fix their house. This is, East Lansing has done this. This is their bread and butter for their CDBG program. Every year through Capital Area Housing Partnership, they do a number of houses within the census tracts that are identified as low to moderate income. The other tract is essentially blight elimination and reconstruction. So tearing down old houses, building a new one. We did not think that was a great approach because acquisition costs alone were going to burn through that $500,000 really quick. So our letter of intent was for $480,000, and our sort of catch, for lack of a better term, was that we indicated in our budget that because our board has tentatively set aside money for affordable housing initiatives, that we would pay the administrative costs locally. So all of MSHDA's dollars would go into the public. They obviously like that. We also would recommend, and we will likely be recommending this on the 9th, that the board also set aside up to $120,000 to essentially cover cost overruns, because this program will not start until February 1 of next year. That's when we will sign, if we are selected, sign the contract with MSHDA, and we'll hit the ground running. Maximum of $40,000 can be spent per property, but if asphalt shingle costs go up 20%, we would like to have some flexibility there to cover those cost overruns. So that's the money side of this. The physical side of this, we had to indicate the locations in which we would be directing this funding. We are going to direct the funding to Tower Gardens area. So functionally everything north of Lake Lansing and west of Hagedorn, with some exceptions obviously, and which I have maps I'm happy to share with the board. I apologize I didn't make it in your packet. The second area, we have identified 3 neighborhoods in Hazlet that near the lake that we will be reaching out to the neighbors. Ultimately, what the plan here is that we will partner with Capital Area Housing Partnership. They're pros at this. Director Van Fossen and Emma, his right hand, have done this for years, and we'll be able to implement their program quickly. They will functionally pepper both of these all these 4 neighborhoods with postcards and information to get people to reach out and be interested in this program. And that's how we're going to hopefully find 12 properties to rehabilitate. Ultimately, if it's under $10,000, it's a direct grant. If it's up to $40,000, it's a 5-year forgiveness cycle. So every year, a certain amount would be forgiven, and at the end of the 5 years, it would be fully forgiven. So we are we're very excited for this, and least of which is because my wife used to work on this at MEDC and would never give me the money, and so now I'm getting it, which I remind her of every time I talk about this. But this is a good jumping off point for some housing affordability in the area and to help some of the people. I know that the board talked 2 years ago, when I first started, about even increasing the poverty threshold on the property tax side, and so this is just another piece of that puzzle. Why this is in front of you this evening on short notice. The LOI was already on short notice, and so we made it through that part of the process. We've now been invited to apply, and I have the application score sheet and everything here. There will be a number of items that we will have, the Director Massey will bring forward on the 9th for the board's adoption. So there's a resolution of support. There is a acknowledgement of the certifying officer. Madam Supervisor. We will teach you about CDBG now.
Okay.
Because you're going to sign your life away.
Oh.
There will likely be an amendment to our public participation plan to ensure that we are in compliance with HUD and state guidelines in that regard. And there's a number of other things. I don't have my full list in front of me, but we wanted to get this in front of the board to, one, make sure there was no concern with how we've proposed to allocate some of the ARPA dollars for affordable housing, one. So that's a $210,000 roughly ask. And then two, let you know there's going to be a number of things that you've never seen before on the 9th for adoption. And the timing is of the essence. We to even further talk about the timing, we have to have everything in by the 14th. I will be back from vacation. Director Massey will not. So she's going to get everything together Thursday night, have the supervisor sign some things, put them on my desk, and then when I get back Monday morning, I'm going to go through everything, make sure we're good, and get it submitted.
Okay.
So that's overview of the program. Obviously, we would strongly encourage anyone in neighborhoods around the watershed or the lake and neighborhoods in Tower Gardens that has any interest that's watching this in some homeowner rehabilitation, please reach out and at least get your contact information to us. CHP will beat the bushes to spend this money in the community. They're good at it. And worst case, we've already talked through, okay, if we need to expand our geographic area to the entire township, how would that look? And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So I'm happy to answer any questions. This has been a whirlwind of a project, and could not do it without Director Massey.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor Jackson. Director Schmidt, you're speaking my language. So just to speak to some of what you said, I like the idea that you're doing a neighborhood targeted approach and that you're looking at rehab. Both of those create neighborhood stabilization. And when you do that, it likely leads to more and more applicants. Neighbors see what's happening within neighborhoods and they want to do more. When one person does one, it gives people like this, wow, maybe I'll even just paint my fence. It brings this, what's the word?
Incentive.
Anyways, it makes people feel very happy about their neighborhood. So I really appreciate that. I do understand Mich has very, very strict guidelines. MEDC did get these CDBG funds for a very long time, but they're now back in the neighborhood. So I'm so happy you guys are taking care of this, and it does meet our objective for affordable housing. 100% support.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Has any consideration been given to Winslow Trailer Park?
Whoa.
No. So the issue is that my understanding is as part of the state housing plan, I'm actually on one of the subcommittees developing that, helping developing that little tiny bit. There is a portion of that plan that's going to speak more directly to mobile home parks. This, we do not believe it would have qualified here based on how the guidelines were set up. Because we did have that conversation of like, okay, is this us starting to deal with the problem? I think because of the somewhat questionable ownership of some of the trailers, we would run into a problem being able to show that it's an owner-occupied structure.
Okay, right, all right. And I also have experience with CDBG from the MEDC. I work with them all the time. So it's a good thing if you want to know some answers.
Or not.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. DeShane.
Just thank you for bringing this to us. It's a great way to use some of our affordable housing monies, and we really, the idea of us not using that and putting it into roads, while our roads need to help, we need affordable housing even more than we need better roads right now. So thank you.
And it's a great start. Great start. Thank you.
Thank you.
We come to item 14, comments from the public. Please come to the podium, give us your name and address.
Hi, Dr. Josh Nam, 1517 River Terrace. I'll be very brief. I want to run too. I just wanted to speak really quickly about some of the early voting discussion that happened earlier. So I've been a precinct chairperson for precinct number 1 for East Lansing for the past 3 years. And, that involves opening the poll, or, well, not opening the polling station, but getting there at 6 a.m. to Brody Hall. Polls close at 8 p.m. It's the longest working day I ever do every year. Last election when the reproductive rights were on the ballot, I came actually back after delivering my ballots from my polling location to go back to Brody Hall to help with the massive line that went till midnight. And so I definitely know that things can go wrong, lines can get very long, and obviously we want to make sure that we allow every person to be able to vote. And so I definitely approve of trying to make sure that early voting definitely meets everyone's needs. I also am strongly in favor of doing what we can to educate, especially MSU students, about where they should be voting. A lot of them come to my precinct, and I have to say, nope, you have to go to the Meridian Township Clerk's office, or you have to go to East Lansing Clerk's office, and that, it makes the process longer for everyone. But yeah, strongly in favor of that. The other issue that I wanted to quickly address was with regard to, trying to recruit police officers. I think one thing that I didn't hear come up, but I think definitely should be part of the discussion, is perhaps what we shouldn't be trying to do is hire more police officers. Perhaps we should be trying to reduce police load. So for instance, MSU has a really prestigious school of social work, and perhaps one of the options is to reduce the workload on, Officer Grillo and his department by offloading some of that to social programs to send, have some of those calls for service not be serviced by a police officer, but be serviced by someone who might be better able to handle that circumstance, and somebody who we might be able to hire too. And so I would say, I'm definitely not opposed to setting up incentive programs to try to steal police officers from the other agencies and things like that. But perhaps what we might want to be doing is hiring people who aren't police officers to deal with some of the work that we're currently putting on our overworked officers. I definitely don't want a police officer coming to, my call who's been working a lot of overtime, who's, very overwhelmed, when there might be somebody better suited for, a particular situation. So I just want to make sure that that definitely should be something that's in the discussion and something that might help over the long term if we started, diverting some of these calls to to people who might be better suited than a police officer to solve them. All right, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate the work you guys are all doing.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else? Other matters and board member comments? Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I had one, and I've been thinking about the entryway to Meridian from the north. Ever since our listening session over at Raleigh Elementary. And as I was driving by there, I noticed that Marshall Park, which is directly north of Lake Lansing South, the equipment there, the signage there, it's all getting very run down. And in looking back at our improvement plan over the next couple of years, it is on the list for several years out. I wonder if we could explore that possibility of bringing that forward a year or two and working on that in the shorter term as opposed to waiting a couple of years. I think that would give a really needed facelift to that area, and it would make that a vibrant part of the community that the local children and their parents and whatnot can come and enjoy.
Yeah, I certainly think that's something I would recommend taking to the Park Commission, because they're planning that, they have a master plan, park
We do,
plan.
yeah.
And that suggestion, run it by them and see how they feel about it and how together we can maybe make that happen.
Okay, maybe I'll let since Manager Walsh had to leave for the conference, I'll mention it to him and Director Maisner, and maybe we can get on their agenda at some point.
Yep, not a bad idea at all.
Good idea.
Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you. Very quickly, and our individual resident left, but I just want to put on record, and Chief Grillo, please correct me if I'm wrong, but last time I talked to Chief Plaga, we do have social workers on staff. It's just on a virtual basis. Am I accurate in saying that? Or contract, not on staff?
Yes, ma'am. So when we have somebody who's in like a mental health crisis, we work with community mental health through our iPad program. Excuse me. It keeps the social worker out of danger, and also we can get the people the resources that they need without having to actually put somebody in that situation. So yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Not to say we shouldn't explore other options like that, but I just wanted to make sure that our community knows that is a resource that our police department already uses.
Yes, ma'am.
While you're at the podium, since we were just discussing Tower Gardens, am I correct, there was a recent shooting in the Tower Gardens neighborhood?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Was that Saturday? There was a disagreement between neighbors, and one decided to take matters in their own hand and fired 5 rounds into a unoccupied vehicle. There were no injuries, thank goodness.
Okay. Further sign that we need to do some reinvestment in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other matters, board member comments, no others? Then we stand adjourned. Or no. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Okay. Guthrie? Treasurer Deshane, all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Chair votes yes. Good night, all.